Chapter 3749. When the battle between the two figures reached its climax, Zhuowen discovered that the two figures overlapped. In the end, they completely fused together. What's going on? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He discovered that after the two figures overlapped, the aura of the new figure became even more vast. Furthermore, this figure was surrounded by the shadow of a sword and a saber. Immediately after, a message appeared in Zhuowen's mind. Grand Mist Soldier Formula. Fuse all the divine abilities in the world. Wield all the divine weapons in the universe. Grand Mist Soldier Formula? Zhuowen was stunned. After pondering for a moment, his eyes revealed a blazing light. He discovered that ever since the figures manifested by the two divine abilities had completely merged, he had completely mastered the two divine abilities. To be more precise, the two divine abilities had already merged into one and become a new divine ability. Furthermore, the grade of this divine ability was higher than the Grand Mist Floating Blade and the Lightning Sword art. In other words, the divine ability derived from the fusion of the two was actually an evolution process. If his memories could fuse with more divine abilities, wouldn't he be able to continuously raise the grade of the primordial soldier mantra's divine ability? Thinking of this, Zhuowen decided to experiment. He quietly put down the lightning sword art and picked up the green howl halberd art. The moment he released the green howl halberd art, a new blurry figure appeared in his soul. This figure was holding a large halberd and was fighting with the previous figure. The same thing happened again. In the midst of the battle, the two figures merged together again. The new figure that was formed was surrounded by the shadow of a saber, a sword, and a halberd. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with surprise. There were thousands of divine abilities on the first floor of the Divine Ability Pavilion. If he could fuse all these divine abilities, he might be able to fuse them into a divine ability of an extremely high grade. However, when Zhuowen picked up the floating light shadow, a new blurry figure appeared in his soul. However, this figure did not fight with the previous figure. Instead, it used a movement technique and flew around his soul like a ghost. He was demonstrating the divine ability, floating light shadow. After this new figure finished demonstrating its sacred art, it actually stood quietly beside the first figure. Then, Zhuowen discovered that his self-created sacred art, primordial purple snow, appeared and merged with the figure formed by floating light shadow. Grand Mist movement technique, treading on boundless space and transcending time. Zhuowen was stunned. He took a look at floating light shadow and realized that this divine art was the same as primordial purple snow. They were both movement divine arts. After floating light shadow merged with primordial purple snow, a new blurry figure was formed. He stood quietly beside the figure formed by primordial soldier mantra, and the two of them were at peace. The primordial stone really gave me a huge surprise. The primordial soldier mantra and the primordial movement art are two types of divine abilities that can be continuously upgraded. Just like humans, they can be cultivated and upgraded. I've never seen or heard of such a divine ability before. This is my biggest secret, and I definitely can't let anyone know about it. Zhuowen's eyes shone brightly. In the past, he had always thought that the primordial stone's function was only to record the primordial technique. But now, he realized that the primordial stone was far more mysterious than he had imagined. At least, he had never thought that the primordial stone could fuse astral weapon fragments and various kinds of divine abilities. This was a very terrifying innate talent, because he could continuously fuse and forge the most powerful abilities and the most powerful astral weapon. And this was the most important ability that allowed Zhuowen to rise rapidly in the 100 domains outside the realm and reach the top. Next, Zhuowen began to frantically flip through the divine ability books on the first level. Of course, he didn't read it carefully, but rather skimmed through it very roughly. The primordial stone would record all the contents of the ancient book and manifest an indistinct figure in his divine sense before fusing with it. By the time Zhuowen finished reading the last divine ability book on the first level, Half a day had already passed, and Zhuowen discovered that the primordial soldier mantra and primordial movement technique had already been upgraded to the peak of the second level. Zhuowen knew that if he wanted to upgrade these two divine abilities, he wouldn't be able to do so even if he continued to fuse the first-level divine abilities. After all, the level of the first-level divine abilities was too low. If he really wanted to rely on quantity to upgrade them, Zhuowen estimated that he would need at least hundreds of thousands of different first-level divine abilities to be able to do so. Zhuowen knew that if he wanted to continue upgrading the primordial soldier mantra and primordial movement technique, he would have to fuse the second level or even the third-level divine abilities. Looks like it's time to go to the sky pit. Let's get the token to enter the second level first. Zhuowen left the divine ability pavilion. He looked at the sky and realized that it was about to turn dark. He decided to go to the sky pit tomorrow. The night of the 100 Outer Territories was filled with evil spirits. Although there were statues made of fluorite everywhere in the Ascension sect, the evil spirits around the mountain range didn't dare to enter the Ascension sect and disturb the disciples. However, the Ascension sect was simply too big. Moreover, the Sky Dragon Mountain range where it was located was even more dangerous. The evil spirits were abnormally powerful. The disciples' residences were surrounded by a large array and were very safe. However, a training ground like the Sky Pit didn't have so many protective measures. Occasionally, some powerful evil spirits would break through the barrier and enter the training ground. This was also a common occurrence. Therefore, the Ascension sect had a rule that after nightfall, disciples had to return to their residences. Otherwise, they would be punished according to the sect's rules. On the way back to his residence, Zhuowen met Zhou Ji. Zhou Ji had also just come out of the Divine Ability Pavilion. When he saw Zhuowen, he immediately greeted him respectfully. After receiving the 7 Lives Chi Recovery Pill from Zhuowen, Zhou Ji's injuries recovered extremely quickly. In just a few hours, his injuries were completely healed. After recovering from his injuries, he came to the Divine Ability Pavilion to choose a new divine ability to cultivate. He originally thought that Zhuowen had already left the Divine Ability Pavilion. However, he didn't expect that Zhuowen actually stayed in the Divine Ability Pavilion for more than half a day and only left when night fell. Zhou Ji, your residence isn't far from mine. Let's go back together. Zhuowen said indifferently and walked forward. Zhou Ji was submissive and followed closely behind Zhuowen. His posture was like a loyal follower. Many disciples who came out of the Divine Ability Pavilion were surprised when they saw this scene. Zhou Ji was one of the top 10 experts in the Outer Sect. He was very famous among the Outer Sect disciples. Many disciples knew Zhou Ji. However, when they saw Zhou Ji obediently following behind Zhuowen, many disciples secretly guessed that Zhuowen's identity wasn't ordinary. When Zhuowen returned to his residence, he found that there were people moving around in his courtyard. Chapter 3750. It's you, Trash. Why are you in the Ascension sect? When Wei Zi saw Zhuowen, he immediately called him a piece of trash. Zhuowen's eyes darkened as he coldly said, "This is my residence. I'll give you 3 seconds to scram." Wei Zi was enraged and sneered. "I don't know how trash like you entered the Ascension sect. You must have been brought in by that trash Tang, Hong Miao. The two of you are quite bold. You clearly didn't pass the test, and still dare to sneak into the sect. But that's fine too. I'll personally break your limbs and hand you over to Senior Apprentice Sister and I, Kai. This way, Senior Apprentice Sister and I, Kai won't have to do anything." Wei Zi laughed sinisterly as he stepped towards Zhuowen. His right hand formed a claw and smashed towards Zhuowen's legs. It was clear that he was indeed planning to break Zhuowen's limbs, starting from his legs. Zhuowen stood in place and coldly looked at Wei Zi, who was getting closer and closer. When Wei Zi was in front of him, Zhuowen punched out and landed on his claw. Gotcha! Wei Zi's right hand directly twisted and exploded into a bloody mist. Wei Zi loudly screamed as he fell to the ground. Then, Zhuowen stepped out with his right foot and unceremoniously stepped on his 4 limbs 4 times. For crisp sounds of bones breaking rang out as Wei Zi's 4 limbs were completely crushed. Wei Zi directly fainted from the pain. Wei Zi was only at the fifth heaven's blight, while Zhuowen was at the peak of the fetal god transformation stage. Every step he took was imbued with god-shattering stage power. If Wei Zi wanted to repair his limbs, unless he found a treasure, he would be a complete cripple in the future. Zhuowen lifted Wei Zi up with one hand and fiercely slapped him twice. Wei Zi cried out in shock and immediately woke up. When he saw Zhuowen in front of him, he immediately screamed in fear. Zhuowen didn't pay attention to the screaming Wei Zi. Instead, he carried him and walked towards the residence next door. Tang Hongmiao lived next door to him. Now that Wei Zi had taken over his residence, and from Wei Zi's words, he vaguely knew that Tang Hongmiao's situation wasn't good. Bang! Zhuowen kicked open Tang Hongmiao's door and barged in. Just as he expected, he did not see Tang Hongmiao in the room. "Where is Tang Hongmiao?" Zhuowen stared coldly at Wei Zidao. Wei Zi had long been scared silly. Now that he saw Zhuowen asking, how could he dare to hide anything? It turned out that under Ni Kai's lead, he and Furong first followed Lu Yong into the inner court disciples' residence. They strolled around the inner court disciples area for a while before returning to the outer court disciples area. It was precisely because of this that Wei Zi and Furong came back later than Zhuowen and Tang Hongmiao to choose a place to stay. In order to curry favor with Lu Yongwang, Ni Kai planned to give the best residence in the outer disciple area to Wei Zi and Furong. It happened to be the room that Zhou Ji had arranged for Zhuowen and Tang Hongmiao. After they entered the room, they immediately discovered Tang Hongmiao. Thus, without saying anything, they captured Tang Hongmiao and determined that he had snuck into the Ascension School. Now, Tang Hongmiao had already been brought to the law enforcement hall by Ni Kai and Furong. According to the Ascension School's rules, it was a capital offense for an outsider to sneak into the Ascension School. Tang Hongmiao has the outer court disciple identity token on him. Why are you so sure that he snuck in? Zhuowen asked furiously. Wei Zi's eyes flickered as he hemmed and hawed. Speak. If there's half a lie, I'll kill you right now. Zhuowen tightened his grip. Wei Zi cried out in pain and hurriedly told the truth. It turned out that after Tang Hongmiao met them, he immediately flashed the identity token on him. However, it was snatched away by Ni Kai, and she slandered Tang Hongmiao for forging the identity token. Ni Kai, Furong, the two of you are courting death. Zhuowen's eyes were brimming with killing intent as he continued. Tell me the direction to the law enforcement hall. Otherwise, die. Wei Zi was much more tactful now. He cooperated with Zhuowen and took the initiative to point the way for Zhuowen. As the night fell, the entire Ascension School lit up with bright light. Zhuowen walked along the mountain path and soon came to the entrance of the law enforcement hall. At this moment, a few people walked out of the law enforcement hall. The person in the lead was an old man in an elder's costume. His eyes were cold, he had a goatee, and his body emitted a gloomy and cold aura. This person was Li Xiong, the law enforcement elder of Ascension School. Behind him were two attendants who wore iron chains and black iron masks. Their auras were extremely strong. Beside Li Xiong and the other two people, there were two women. These two women were Ni Kai and Furong. The law enforcement hall was originally closed 15 minutes ago. Because of you, it delayed a lot of time. As a result, it's already dark now. Although it's within the sect's territory, you still have to be more careful when walking at night. Li Xiong looked at Ni Kai and Furong and reminded coldly. Ni Kai and Furong quickly bowed their heads and answered respectfully. When Zhuowen carried the half-dead Wei Zi and came in front of them, it finally attracted their attention. Li Xiong glanced at Zhuowen indifferently and couldn't help but frown. However, when Ni Kai and Furong saw Wei Zi in Zhuowen's hands, their faces changed greatly. Furong, in particular, was both shocked and angry. It's you? The trash who failed the test? The moment Furong saw Zhuowen, she couldn't help but exclaim. Obviously, she recognized Zhuowen. How dare you? How dare you seriously injure junior brother Wei Zi? Ni Kai even shouted in an indifferent manner. I'll settle accounts with you two later. Now shut up. After Zhuowen finished speaking, he ignored the flustered and exasperated Ni, Kai, and Furong. Instead, he looked at Li Xiong and said, "Senior, you must be the law enforcement elder. The man caught by these two women just now is the outer disciple who entered Ascension School with me. But these two women, because of their personal grudges, slandered my friend as an outsider who sneaked in. So, law enforcement elder, please investigate clearly." Li Xiong frowned slightly and said impatiently, "The law enforcement hall is closed today. If you have any objection, you can come to the law enforcement hall again tomorrow. I'll try it again then." As Li Xiong said, he lifted his foot and bypassed Zhuowen, leaving. Zhuowen stretched out his hand and stopped Li Xiong. He said in a low voice, "Then I want to ask, where's my friend Tang Hongmiao now? Why didn't I see him come out with you? You're really presumptuous. I said that I'll try it again tomorrow. Tang Hongmiao has been detained in the dark prison now. If you really have any objection, you can come again tomorrow and bring the evidence. Who will believe your one-sided statement?" Li Xiong shook his sleeve, and a strong airwave whizzed out and rushed to Zhuowen. He was really angry. This insignificant outer sect disciple actually tried to stop him again and again. Did he really think that he had a good temper? But soon, Li Xiong was shocked because he realized that Zhuowen stood in the same place and was as still as a mountain. He wasn't affected by his airwave at all. He was an elder, and his cultivation had reached the middle stage of the void god transformation. A mere outer disciple should be severely injured by his attack. Chapter 37:51. You trash, you are courting death. When Ni Kai saw Zhuowen rushing towards her, she was not shocked but happy. She saw Zhuowen's Taoist root fail in the test. In her opinion, this guy's cultivation was absolutely trash. How could he be her opponent? Bang! However, in the next moment, Ni Kai was completely dumbfounded. She saw that Zhuowen had knocked her to the ground with a single punch. Then, Zhuowen stepped on Ni Kai's right hand and slowly took off the spiritual ring on her finger. Zhuowen used his divine thought to break the restriction on the surface of the spiritual ring and took out Tang Hongmiao's identity token that was taken away by Ni Kai. Law enforcing elder. This is Tang Hongmiao's identity token as an outer disciple. I think you, as an elder, know best whether this token is real or not. Zhuowen handed Tang Hongmiao's identity token to Li Xiong and said lightly. Li Xiong took the identity token and looked at Zhuowen deeply. Just now, when Zhuowen attacked, he felt that Zhuowen's cultivation was about the peak of embryonic god transformation, which was not much higher than Ni Kai. But this guy could defeat Ni Kai with one move, which showed that this guy was not simple. Furong, who was not far away and wanted to see Zhuowen make a fool of himself, was stunned. Li Xiong looked at the token in his hand and nodded. This is indeed the identity token of an outer disciple. It seems that we have wronged a good guy. Lin Yi, go to the dark prison and release Tang Hongmiao. A subordinate standing behind Li Xiong nodded and entered the law enforcement hall again. What's your name? Li Xiong looked at Zhuowen gently and asked. I am Zhuoyin Xue, an outer disciple who just entered the sect. Zhuowen said neither humbly nor overbearingly. Then are you willing to be my last disciple? If you worship me as your teacher, you can become an inner disciple directly, Li Xiong said with a smile. Furong and Ni Kai's expressions changed drastically. In the Ascension sect, every elder would take in a closed-door disciple. Those who had good aptitude or were outstanding in other aspects and caught the eye of an elder would soar to the sky and become an inner court disciple. They would enjoy better resources and treatment. Of course, the probability of this happening was very small. After all, the aptitude of an outer court disciple was indeed much worse than an inner court disciple. At least in terms of cultivation aptitude, they were far inferior to inner sect disciples. This was innate. In the history of the Ascension sect, the outer sect disciples who were accepted as final disciples by the elders were basically those who were accepted as final disciples due to their talents in other aspects. For example, he was particularly outstanding in alchemy, array formation, and language. The reason why Li Xiong valued Zhuowen was naturally that Zhuowen's strength was far beyond his own realm. Enforcement Elder, this person's ancestral Dao root is extremely inferior. I was the one that presided over the test today, and the natural endowment of his ancestral Dao root is insufficient. Ni Kai spoke hurriedly. Li Xiong frowned slightly, looked at Zhuowen and asked, "Is what she said true?" Zhuowen nodded and said, "My ancestral Dao root is indeed inferior." Li Xiong's eyes flickered as he took out a crystal ball from his spirit ring and passed it before Zhuowen. He said, "Zhuowen, extend your hand to the crystal ball. I want to see the grade of your ancestral Dao root with my own eyes." Zhuowen didn't refuse and placed his hand on the crystal ball. But without a doubt, the crystal ball didn't have any reaction. A trace of disappointment flashed past Li Xiong's eyes, and then he calmly put away the crystal ball and slowly closed his eyes. He didn't mention the matter of taking in a disciple again. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. This Li Xiong is really realistic. He decisively gave up on taking in a disciple when he saw that my ancestral Dao root was extremely inferior. However, Zhuowen didn't care because it didn't affect him whether Li Xiong took in a disciple or not. In a short while, Lin escorted Tang Hongmiao out of the enforcement hall. Li Xiong released the shackles on Tang Hongmiao and passed them to Zhuowen. He said, "This matter is over. All of you can leave." Brother Zhuo, you saved me once again." Tang Hongmiao was moved to tears. Zhuowen didn't leave but said in a deep voice, "Enforcement Elder, Ni Kai and Furong didn't distinguish between right and wrong and slandered Tang Hongmiao as a thief who snuck in. If I didn't arrive in time, the enforcement hall would have mistakenly killed a good person. Doesn't the enforcement elder have anything to say?" Li Xiong snorted coldly and said, "It's already very late. If you really have other things to complain about, then come back tomorrow." After he finished speaking, Li Xiong didn't even look at Zhuowen as he brought his two subordinates and walked straight toward the small path. "Zhuowen Yinxue, you better not touch senior sister Ni Kai. Her brother is one of the top 10 experts in the inner sect. He's not someone you can afford to offend. If you know what's good for you, quickly let senior sister Ni Kai go." Furong shouted coldly. Tang Hongmiao revealed a worried expression and advised Zhuowen, "Brother Zhuo, Ni Kai's background isn't small. Even that Li Xiong didn't overly blame Ni Kai. Let's just forget about it." Ni Kai revealed a cold and arrogant expression and said coldly, "Trash, why aren't you taking your dirty foot away from my hand?" Zhuowen looked down at Ni Kai indifferently. His right foot suddenly exerted force and shattered the bones in Ni Kai's right arm. Ni Kai screamed miserably. Immediately after, Zhuowen stepped out again and landed on Ni Kai's left arm. Another bone-cracking sound was heard, and Ni Kai's left arm was completely shattered. That intense pain rushed straight to Ni Kai's head, causing her to finally faint. "Threatening me?" Zhuowen coldly glanced at Furong, who was shivering in fear. He lifted Ni Kai up and threw her to Furong. "Remember, it's best not to provoke me and Brother Tang. Otherwise, next time, not only will I cripple your hands, I will also take your lives." After Zhuowen finished speaking, he left with Tang Hongmiao. Furong squatted beside Ni Kai and shivered. She didn't dare to get up for a long time until Ni Kai woke up. "Zhuowen Yinxue, I want you to die. I want you to die." Ni Kai's eyes were filled with resentment. She stood up with difficulty and staggered back to her residence with Furong. If she wanted to recover her hands, she would need a long time of recuperation and precious medicinal treatment. This would delay a lot of cultivation time. In this fierce competition in the Ascension sect, it was very dangerous to delay one's cultivation time. It was very easy to be eliminated by others. The next day, just as the sky was about to brighten, Zhuowen opened the door. He planned to go to the sinkhole today and pass the first 10 sinkholes to obtain the token to enter the second floor of the Magical Abilities Pavilion. When he left his residence, he met an uninvited guest. Zhou hurriedly walked over and stopped Zhuowen. "Junior Brother Zhuo, did you cripple Ni Kai's hands yesterday?" Zhou asked in a low voice. They indiscriminately occupied our residence and slandered Brother Tang, so I taught them a lesson. Zhuan calmly said. Zhou Ji said, somewhat anxiously, Junior brother Zhua, you're really in trouble now. And I Kai has an older brother who is one of the top 10 inner sect disciples. Furong has a close relationship with Liu Yong. Liu Yong has just become an inner sect disciple, so there's nothing to be afraid of. The main thing is Ni Kai's brother, senior brother Zhou. If you're looking for me because of this, then there's no need to say anything. If Ni Kai's brother really comes looking for trouble with me, I'm not afraid, Zhuan said as he walked past Zhou Ji. Zhou Ji looked at Zhuan's back with a complicated gaze. He recalled the scene of Zhuan beating him up. Without a doubt, Zhuan's strength was terrifying. Chapter 3752. In the north of Ascension sect, the number of mountains was much less. Valleys stood there. In the core area of these valleys was an unbelievably huge pit. This huge pit's shape was irregular. Inside the huge pit, there were many small irregular pits. Zhuan counted. From near to far, there were a total of 81 small pits. He knew that this was the Ascension sect's extremely famous trial ground, the Heavenly Pit. There were not many disciples near the Heavenly Pit. The surroundings were rather deserted. The entrance to the Heavenly Pit was a long passageway. After Zhuan walked along the passageway for over 10 minutes, he arrived at a simple and crude stone room. In the stone room, there was only a stone table, a stone bench, and a statue that was half a person's height emitting light. Apart from that, beside the stone room's wall was a stone bed that was cut out. On the stone bed, a white-haired old man sat upright. When Zhuan arrived at the stone room, the old man slowly opened his eyes. He glanced at Zhuan indifferently and said, "You're here to challenge the Heavenly Pit?" "Yes." Zhuan cupped his fists. He could sense the powerful aura faintly emitted from the old man's body. This aura gave him a feeling of extreme danger. This feeling was much stronger than Elder Ing Yin, who intercepted him back then. Without a doubt, this old man was a cultivator even stronger than Elder Ing Yin. You should only be an outer sect disciple, right? With your cultivation, isn't it too forceful to plan on challenging the Heavenly Pit? The Heavenly Pit is filled with danger. It's very easy to lose your life. The old man sized up Zhuan and actually spoke to remind him. Many thanks for the reminder, Senior. I'm here to be able to enter the second level of the Divine Abilities Pavilion. I want to challenge the first 10 Heavenly Pits to obtain the proof token. Zhuan answered, "Oh, so you're here to enter the second level of the Divine Abilities Pavilion. Since that's the case, then enter that passageway. Also, before you enter, I still have to remind you, inside the Heavenly Pit, there are 9 small pits as a whole. In other words, if you want to leave the Heavenly Pit, then you have to challenge 9 small pits consecutively. You have to cheat. Otherwise, you won't be able to leave the sinkhole. Also, as you continue to pass through the sinkholes will become more and more difficult. You'd better act according to your ability," the old man said indifferently. Zhuan was startled. He didn't think that this pit would have such a rule. If he wanted to obtain the proof token, he would need to pass through 10 pits. Didn't that mean that he would need to pass through 18 pits before he could obtain the proof token to enter the second level of the Divine Ability Pavilion? This rule of the Mystical Ability Pavilion was truly a trap. Zhuan cupped his hands at the old man and walked straight into the passage the old man had pointed out. Not long after, Zhuan walked out of the tunnel and arrived at the bottom of a huge pit. He looked up and saw the rays of light falling from the sky, but they did not bring much light to the huge pit. Zhuan knew that this was the interior of the sinkhole. Inside this huge sinkhole, there were many smaller sinkholes. Moreover, these pits were divided into 9 piles, and each pile was made up of 9 pits. Zhuan also realized that these piles of small pits were gradually growing towards the center of the huge pit. Zhuan was currently in one of the 9 small pits at the edge. Let's try entering this pile of small pits first. Zhuan's eyes flashed as he jumped into the small pits below. Boom! The moment he entered the first small pit, a powerful pressure surged into his body like a tide. Zhuowen couldn't get used to it and knelt on one knee on the ground. However, he quickly got used to it and slowly stood up. What a terrifying pressure! Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. With this level of pressure, if an embryonic God transformation realm cultivator wasn't prepared, they would be injured directly. At the same time, Zhuowen realized that the chaotic energy in this small pit was much denser than in other areas of the Ascension sect. Zhuowen didn't even need to absorb it. After the chaotic energy entered his acupuncture points, it automatically turned into broken divine power and surged into his body. Junior brother, you actually got used to the pressure in this sinkhole so quickly. You're really amazing. Not far away, a surprised voice sounded. Zhuowen looked over and saw a young man sitting cross-legged on a rock dozens of meters to his left. Apart from that, he also noticed that there were dozens of figures sitting cross-legged in the small pit, cultivating. The auras of these people were quite strong, and the weakest one was at the spirit transformation realm. Zhuowen knew that these people were all inner disciples. After all, before he came to the sinkhole, he already knew that there were very few outer disciples who came to the sinkhole to train. Even if there were, only the top 10 outer disciples dared to come. Wouldn't the other disciples be courting death? I've trained before, so I got used to it quickly. Zhuowen laughed and planned to fool them. Haha, I see. My name is Zhou Xin, and I'm a disciple of the 7th elder from the main peak. I wonder which elder's disciple are you? The young man jumped down from the rock and slowly walked toward Zhuowen as he asked curiously. To him, Zhuowen was an unfamiliar face. He had never seen Zhuowen before. I'm Zhuowen Xue, an outer disciple. I just entered yesterday. Zhuowen said truthfully. As soon as he said that, the rest of the people in the small pit opened their eyes and looked at Zhuowen strangely. You said that you're an outer disciple. You just entered? Zhou Xin sized up Zhuowen with a strange expression. Senior brother Zhou, is there a problem? Zhuowen said with a frown. There's no problem. Actually, those who come to the sinkhole to train are mostly inner disciples and core disciples. There are very few outer disciples. As far as I know, only the top 10 outer disciples, Tang Shuin, Liao Xingzhou, and Sihai occasionally come here to train. The rest of the outer disciples are basically not seen, Zhou Xin said with a smile. Zhuowen saw that Zhou Xin did not put on any airs as an inner disciple and had a good impression of him. He looked around and asked in a low voice, Senior brother Zhou, why are you all training here? Isn't it said that there are 81 small pits in this sinkhole, and every 9 small pits form a group? Disciples who enter the sinkhole, don't they have to pass through a group before they can leave? This is only the first small pit. Are you planning to train until it's dark? Zhou Xin looked at Zhuowen strangely and laughed dryly. Junior brother Zhou, it seems that you really don't know anything. That rule is actually only for outer disciples. We inner disciples have a teleportation array in our identity token. As long as we enter the sinkhole and can't pass the trial, we only need to spend a certain amount of contribution points to activate the teleportation array in the token, and we can safely leave the sinkhole. As for outer disciples, they're not so lucky. Chapter 3753. Junior Apprentice Brother Zhua. This heavenly pit's first group of 9 pits is the least difficult. With your strength, it's probably very difficult to clear the first group today. You should use the transmission array in my identity token to leave this place first. Next time, you have to remember not to be so reckless. After all, your identity token doesn't have a transmission array. Zhou Xin patted Zhuowen's shoulder and took out his identity token, planning to hand it over to Zhuowen. Zhuowen was stunned. He did not think that this Zhou Xin was actually a goody two-shoes, actually wanted to help him the first time they met. Zhuowen waved his hand and said, Senior Apprentice Brother Zhou, I appreciate your good intentions. I came to train in the first place, so I naturally have to give a try first. If I leave here without even trying, wouldn't that be too embarrassing? Seeing Zhuowen's insistence, Zhou Xin nodded and took back the identity token. Her, truly a reckless fellow. An outer sect disciple who just entered the sect dares to come to the heavenly pit to die. You're still the only one. Not far away, a youth with a scar slowly stood up and gave Zhuan a rather disdainful glance. Stomping his foot, he leaped out of the first pit and stepped into the second pit. He's the outer sect disciple ranked number 1 in the top 10, Sung Shu Wen. His personality is more egotistical. Don't look at how he's just an outer sect disciple. His strength is very formidable and can already rival ordinary inner sect disciples. If not for his Dao root being bad, he would have long been an inner sect disciple already. Zhou Xian explained. Zhuan nodded and asked, Senior apprentice brother Zhou, is the chaos energy all the same in this group of pits? No, the chaos energy in this group's last pit is the thickest. It's just that the pressure of that pit is too terrifying. Even I can only stay for half an incense stick's time. That's already my limit. People like us cultivate for half a day in the first pit first, then slowly move towards the pits at the back to cultivate. Only half an incense stick's time before night falls will we enter the last pit. This is the best cultivation efficiency, Zhou Xian said with a slight smile. Speaking up to here, Zhou Xian said in a rather mysterious voice, Junior apprentice brother Zhua, cultivating in this heavenly pit has another great benefit. That is that you don't have to fear the heaven-crushing grand tribulation. What? Aren't you afraid of the heaven-crushing tribulation? Zhuowen was stunned. Yes, this sinkhole had existed for a long time. It had existed in the Sky Dragon Mountain range since the establishment of the Ascension sect. No one knows how this sinkhole was formed. In addition to the strange pressure and the rich chaotic energy, the heavenly pit also has some kind of extremely mysterious domain. This domain can interfere with the heaven-crushing tribulation. The ancestors of the Ascension sect have already verified this. The heavenly pit's domain was enough to withstand any great tribulation below the heaven-crushing fifth transformation. In other words, as long as a cultivator below the fifth heaven-crushing transformation stage broke through in the heavenly pit, they would be able to easily avoid the heaven-crushing tribulation. That's why we intersect disciples like it. It's because he's cultivating in the sinkhole, Zhou Xian whispered. Zhuan's eyes narrowed, but his heart was filled with excitement. Wasn't he most afraid of the heaven-crushing tribulation? Every time there was a heaven-crushing tribulation, Zhuan would always be on tenterhooks and tremble with fear. He was afraid that he would be struck to death by the tribulation. After all, his heaven-crushing tribulation was too terrifying. It was far more terrifying than those of the same cultivation level. At the same time, Zhuan was also slightly worried. With his heaven-crushing tribulation, could this sinkhole's domain really help him withstand it? My heaven-crushing tribulation after advancing to the spirit transformation stage shouldn't be more powerful than a normal cultivator's heaven-crushing fifth transformation stage tribulation. This sinkhole's domain should be able to withstand it. Zhuan's eyes flickered. He decided to break through to the spirit transformation stage in this sinkhole. The chaotic energy here is still not rich enough. I'll go to the 9th sinkhole to take a look. Zhuowen thought to himself. He bid farewell to Zhou Xian and headed to the next sinkhole. This junior brother Zhua is really like a newborn calf that isn't afraid of tigers. The sinkholes behind him will only become more and more terrifying. How long can he last if he goes there? Zhou Xian shook his head and returned to his original rock. He sat down cross-legged and began to cultivate. Although he was enthusiastic, he wasn't going to follow Zhuowen around and protect him. He had already given Zhuowen advice, but the latter didn't listen. If he died in this sinkhole, it would be his own fault. It had nothing to do with him. When Zhuowen jumped into the second sinkhole, he could clearly feel that the pressure in the second sinkhole had increased by 50%. Fortunately, Zhuowen was prepared. Therefore, when he landed in the sinkhole, he didn't end up in a sorry state. There were clearly fewer people in the second sinkhole. There were only about 10 people in it. A piece of trash like you actually followed me. You really overestimated yourself. Who do you think you are? Just obediently stay in the first sinkhole. Coming to the second sinkhole? I think you're just courting death. Not far away, Tsing Shu-Wen noticed Zhuowen and couldn't help but mock him. Zhuowen wasn't satisfied with the second sinkhole. He planned to head to the next sinkhole, but he stopped when he heard Tsing Shu-Wen's mocking words. You know me. Zhuowen looked at Tsing Shu-Wen and spoke with an unpleasant tone. This was the first time Tsing Shu-Wen opened his mouth to mock him. Zhuowen only treated it as this person's nature. His mouth was more venomous, so he didn't care. But this person actually grabbed onto him and didn't let him go, mocking him wantonly. Zhuowen realized that this person was clearly targeting him. You should know that junior apprentice sister Ni Kai is my Dao companion, right? Tsing Shu-Wen's gaze stared at Zhuowen. A cold light flickered, killing intent released without concealing it. Zhuowen already understood why this Tsing Shu-Wen suddenly targeted him. It turned out that it was because of that Ni Kai. What? You want to take revenge for Ni Kai? Zhuowen said coolly. Tsing Shu-Wen laughed coldly and said, Hoo-hoo, originally I was waiting to find you after leaving the sinkhole. But you, this trash, came to the sinkhole yourself. Then there's no need for me to take action. You can't pass through the sinkhole today either. Dead for sure. Finished talking, Tsing Shu-Wen sat back down on his seat, no longer paying attention to Zhuowen. Since you're not pursuing the matter, doesn't mean that I won't pursue it, Zhuowen said coldly. Tsing Shu-Wen's eyes narrowed, and he said, What do you mean by trash? You keep saying that I'm trash, and you even insulted me for no reason. Could it be that you want me to just swallow this insult? Zhuowen said coldly. Tsing Shu-Wen laughed loudly and said with ridicule, You didn't even pass the test of Dao Foundation. Calling you trash is already showing favor to trash. You're still not convinced? But as soon as Tsing Shu-Wen finished speaking, he realized that something was wrong, because Zhuowen's figure in front of him had disappeared. At the instant he turned his head, he immediately saw a fist enlarging in front of his eyes, and in the end, it fiercely landed on his face. Pucci! Tsing Shu-Wen fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood that was mixed with a few broken teeth. You're in the sinkhole, your speed. How can you still be so fast? Tsing Shu-Wen struggled to get up, and he looked at Zhuowen, who stood in front of him with disbelief. Just now, the distance between him and Zhuowen was over a dozen meters, but in the blink of an eye, Zhuowen had appeared in front of him and punched him. If it was in the outside world, this kind of speed could only be considered ordinary, but this was the sinkhole, and everywhere was filled with powerful pressure. In here, it was already very impressive to be able to walk without flushing or panting, but there was actually someone who could move at high speed. Chapter 3754. As for the other disciples in the second pit, they were stunned when they saw that. They all saw Zhuowen's movement just now. His speed was indeed fast. To be able to move so fast in the sinkhole, they knew that he was an expert. Therefore, the way they looked at Zhuowen was full of respect, while the way they looked at Tsing Shu-Wen was full of pity. This hothead is really stupid. How dare he offend such an expert? Tsing Shu-Wen's face was red, but his heart was filled with bitterness. He originally thought that Zhuowen was strong, but he was only slightly stronger than Ni Kai, and far from him. However, he did not expect that his strength was completely inferior to that person, and now he was being humiliated. This is the Ascension sect. Do you dare to kill someone here? Tsing Shu-Wen said fearfully. Are you afraid? Zhuowen looked down at Tsing Shu-Wen and asked indifferently. Tsing Shu-Wen was silent. Zhuowen was right. He was indeed afraid. In the sinkhole, it was normal for disciples who entered the trial to be killed or injured. Even if he was killed by Zhuowen here, the sect would not pursue the matter. However, he was even more unwilling to beg Zhuowen for mercy. If that happened, wouldn't he become a joke? Zhuowen moved his right foot away and said indifferently, You're not qualified for me to kill you. Killing you will only dirty my hands. Get lost. You, Tsing Shu-Wen was furious. Zhuowen glanced at Tsing Shu-Wen from the corner of his eyes and grinned. What? You dare to provoke me? Think carefully. If you provoke me again, I will really kill you. Sung Shu Win's body trembled. A chill rushed from the bottom of his feet to his head. He obediently walked back to his original position and did not say another word. You're indeed a piece of trash. After Zhuowen finished speaking, he leaped out and swept towards the next pit. The other disciples around him laughed, which made Sung Shu Win feel even more humiliated. Sung Shu Win clenched his fists. His eyes were filled with rage. His dignity was ruthlessly trampled on by Zhuowen's last sentence. However, he was powerless to resist and didn't even dare to refute. Zhuowen gave him too much pressure. He knew that Zhuowen would really kill him. When Zhuowen reached the 8th crater, the pressure here was 8 times that of the first crater. Zhuowen's movements were also affected. The primal chaos energy here was exceptionally dense, which made Zhuowen quite satisfied. Zhuowen sat cross-legged in the 8th crater. Terrifying cyclones swirled around his body as he began to absorb the surrounding chaotic energy. About 2 hours later, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. The energy here was indeed abundant, but after Zhuowen absorbed it, he knew that if he wanted to smoothly break through to the divine fetal transformation realm, he would need at least 3 days. He needed a place with more chaotic energy. Thus, he rushed towards the 9th pit. Boom! The pressure in the 9th pit was truly terrifying. When he entered the pit, the pressure smashed onto his body, causing the air to explode. Zhuowen had no choice but to circulate the primordial technique. His entire body surged with purple energy in order to withstand the terrifying pressure. At the same time, he could feel the extremely dense chaotic energy around him. The chaotic energy here was much denser than the 8th crater. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He knew that with the amount of chaotic energy in this small pit, he only needed half a day to successfully break through. Thus, Zhuowen began to sit cross-legged on a rock, silently absorbing the chaotic energy in the area. After half a day, Zhuowen's aura became more and more vast and finally reached its peak. A thunderous sound rang out from Zhuowen's body. His aura underwent a transformation. It was as vast and boundless as the ocean. Zhuowen opened his eyes and slowly stood up. He silently sensed the changes that had occurred after his breakthrough. At this moment, he had broken through to the spirit transformation stage. At this moment, his soul had undergone a mysterious change. The power of his soul did not become stronger, but its essence seemed to have changed. It could be said that his soul was now more suited to the environment of the 100 domains without any abnormalities. Thus, he could unleash even more power from his soul. This was the change in essence brought about by the spirit transformation stage. At the same time, Zhuowen could also feel that the shattered divine power in his body had reached a new level. There was no doubt that his strength had undergone an earth-shattering change during this advancement. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, Zhuowen felt an extremely terrifying tribulation cloud appear above the sinkhole. The tribulation cloud gathered together and formed 2 black holes. Within the black holes, terrifying tribulation energy was brewing. Zhuowen knew that his spirit transformation stage's heaven-crushing tribulation had arrived. However, what surprised Zhuowen was that the aura of the spirit transformation stage, heaven-crushing tribulation, was much weaker than when he had just broken through to the heaven-crushing tribulation. Zhuowen pondered for a moment. He knew that it might be because he had just broken through to the heaven-crushing stage. Thus, the heaven-crushing tribulation that was brewing was naturally extremely terrifying. However, after breaking through to the heaven-crushing stage, the heaven-crushing tribulation would naturally not be so terrifying. Boom! 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 Within the 2 black holes, countless dazzling energy poured out and bombarded the pit like rain. The power was extremely terrifying. All the disciples in the pit could not help but look up at the sky. Their eyes were filled with shock. What a terrifying heaven-crushing tribulation. This is at least the void God transformation stage, heaven-crushing tribulation, right? I wonder which senior brother has broken through to the void God transformation stage. Within the pit, Most of the disciples were discussing spiritedly. They were not very worried that this heaven-crushing tribulation would affect the pit too much. The pit's domain was extremely powerful. It could easily block all heaven-crushing tribulation below the fifth transformation stage. Thus, they were not worried that they would be affected by this heaven-crushing tribulation. Sure enough, when the terrifying tribulation struck the sinkhole, an invisible force appeared in the sinkhole and neutralized all the tribulation that came crashing down. How mysterious. Is this the heaven-crushing tribulation's domain? Zhuowen looked at the heaven-crushing tribulation. When the heaven-crushing tribulation reached the pit and disappeared, his eyes were filled with shock. This pit was really a holy land for breakthroughs. The heaven-crushing tribulation lasted for a few hours. Then it gradually dissipated. The tribulation clouds in the sky also disappeared. Zhuowen looked up at the sky. He realized that the sky was about to darken. He knew that he did not have time to break through the pit today. He could only wait until tomorrow. Junior brother Zhua, you've actually reached the 9th pit. Suddenly, several figures fell into the 9th pit. One of them exclaimed in surprise. Zhuowen looked over and realized that the person who had spoken was the inner court disciple he had met in the first pit, Zhou Hexen. Senior brother Zhou. Zhuowen greeted with a smile. Junior brother Zhua, do you know who was transcending the tribulation just now? I saw that the direction of the heaven-crushing tribulation was in this 9th pit. You arrived earlier than us. Did you see who it was clearly? Zhou Xin asked mysteriously. Zhuowen shook his head and said, Senior brother Zhou, I also just arrived, so I don't know who is transcending the tribulation. Is that so? What a pity. Zhou Xin was slightly disappointed. Chapter 3755. When Zhuowen returned to his residence, he saw Tang Hongmiao standing outside his courtyard anxiously. After Tang Hongmiao saw Zhuowen, he hurriedly walked forward, and his face was filled with anxiety as he said, Brother Zhu, the situation is bad. What's wrong? Zhuowen asked in surprise. Tang Hongmiao sighed and said, Brother Zhuowen, ever since you beat up an Aikai, I went to check on her brother's information and found out that her brother's name is Eniju. He's ranked 5th in the inner sect, and his cultivation has reached the heaven-trampling change. His strength is extremely terrifying. Moreover, Eniju has already sent out a message. In 3 days, he will come out of seclusion and challenge you to a duel in the life and death ring. This is the letter of challenge that he just sent over. As he spoke, Tang Hongmiao passed the letter of challenge to Zhuowen. Although the competition in the Ascension sect was intense, disciples were allowed to fight with each other. However, they were not allowed to kill each other. That was the rule. However, there were also some enemies who were allowed to fight to the death in the life and death ring. On the life and death ring, one would fight to the death. Eniju had invited Zhuowen to the life and death ring to kill him. Brother Zhuowen, Eniju is too powerful. You can't really go to the life and death ring. As long as you don't accept this letter of challenge. Even if Eniju is an inner sect disciple, he won't be able to kill you in the sect. Tang Hongmiao advised. Zhuowen smiled and took the letter of challenge from Tang Hongmiao. He then wrote his name on the letter of challenge. Brother Zhuowen, Tang Hongmiao was in disbelief. I'll accept this letter of challenge. In 3 days on the life and death ring, I want Eniju's life. In Eniju's residence, both of Eniju's hands were wrapped in some kind of black ointment, and her face was extremely gloomy. Her brother, Eniju, had invited the best pharmacist in the Ascension sect. However, he informed her that her hands were too badly damaged and she would need at least 3 months to fully recover. In other words, she would not be able to cultivate in these 3 months and could only stare blankly like a fool. Zhuanyanxue, you bastard! If you don't die, I won't be able to rest in peace. Enai Kai gnashed her teeth. She hated Zhuowen to the core and wished that she could make Zhuowen die in front of her. Creak! The door to her room was pushed open and Furong rushed in. Senior sister Enai Kai. Zhuanyanxue accepted the challenge. Hibiscus said excitedly. Ni Kai's eyes lit up as she revealed a vicious smile. Haha, he's really overestimating himself. He actually accepted the challenge. My brother will definitely kill him. Furong hurriedly chimed in. Of course. With senior brother and I Ju's strength, he's ranked at the top of the inner court, let alone Juan, who's merely an outer court disciple. 3 days later, big brother and I Ju would come out of seclusion, and that would be the death of this bastard. At that time, we'll just have to watch a good show. Ni Kai snorted coldly. Furong also revealed a vicious smile. She recalled how Zhuowen had scared her to the point of wetting her pants. Even now, she felt ashamed and wished that Zhuowen would die without a burial ground. On the second day, Zhuowen went to the crater again. He planned to pass through the second group of craters today and obtain a proof token to enter the second level of the ability pavilion. When he entered the passageway that led to the crater again, he met the old man in the stone room again. The old man slowly opened his eyes and sized up Zhuowen. He said indifferently, "Not bad. Yesterday, you passed the first group of craters on your first visit. Are you going to cultivate in the first group of craters today?" Zhuowen shook his head and said, "Senior, I want to enter the second group of craters." The old man slowly narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "You said you want to enter the second group of craters? I have to remind you that the pressure in the second group of craters is much stronger than the first group." "Yes, I originally planned to enter the second group of craters today and obtain a proof token. I want to get the proof token from you, right?" Zhuowen said with a faint smile. The old man looked deeply at Zhuowen and said expressionlessly, "You really know how to talk. I just don't know if your strength is really as strong as you think. The second passageway on the left leads to the second group of craters. Go in." Zhuowen cupped his fists towards the old man and entered the second passageway on the left. "Sai, are all outer sect disciples so arrogant now?" The old man watched Zhuowen disappear into the passageway and couldn't help but shake his head. Zhuowen walked out of the passageway and once again arrived at the vast crater. He discovered that he was at the other side of the crater today. On his left was the first group of craters from yesterday. On his right, closer to the center of the crater, this should be the second group of craters. When Zhuowen jumped into the first crater, a terrifying pressure surged into his body like a tide. Although Zhuowen was prepared, he still staggered and almost lost his footing. What a powerful pressure! The pressure in the first crater of the second group is even stronger than the pressure in the ninth crater of the first group. On the other hand, the primal chaos energy is really dense. Zhuowen's eyes revealed excitement. According to the amount of primal chaos energy here, he should be able to advance to the spirit transformation intermediate stage in less than a month. Ever since he advanced to the spirit transformation intermediate stage, Zhuowen discovered that his need for primal chaos energy had increased exponentially. If he wanted to advance to the spirit transformation intermediate stage, the amount of primal chaos energy he needed was even more terrifying than when he advanced to the spirit transformation intermediate stage. If he cultivated normally, Zhuowen knew that he would need to spend a lot of energy and time to advance. However, the Ascension sect had this crater, which was enough to shorten his cultivation time. Let's head straight to the ninth crater. Zhuowen's eyes were like lightning as he took large strides forward. When he entered the seventh crater, the surrounding pressure seemed to have materialized. Zhuowen's footsteps also became messy and heavy. Zhuowen took a deep breath and started to circulate the immemorial primordial technique. Instantly, his entire body was enveloped by a mysterious purple energy. His footsteps became strong and powerful once again. Boom! When Zhuowen entered the eighth crater, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he saw a figure. It was a beautiful young lady. Her skin was white, her nose was straight, and her face was delicate. When Zhuowen entered the crater, the young lady slowly opened her eyes. She sized up Zhuowen. When she saw that Zhuowen was wearing the outer court disciple's uniform, her eyes were filled with shock. However, she did not plan to talk to Zhuowen. Instead, she closed her eyes and continued to cultivate. Zhuowen glanced at the young lady and did not plan to speak to her. Instead, He continued to rush towards the ninth crater. Bang! 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 The pressure in the ninth crater was extremely terrifying. When it crushed onto Zhuowen's body, it produced terrifying explosive sounds. Zhuowen frowned his brows. He had to circulate the immemorial primordial technique in the ninth crater. Otherwise, he would definitely suffer from internal injuries from the pressure. However, Zhuowen was gratified by the fact that the primal chaos energy here was extremely powerful. He estimated that he would be able to break through to the spirit transformation intermediate stage in less than half a month if he cultivated here. He found a secluded corner and started to cultivate peacefully. Although the pressure here was extremely terrifying and forced Zhuowen to circulate the immemorial primordial technique at all times, it was extremely difficult. Chapter 3756. After half a day, Zhuowen sensed that someone had entered the ninth crater. He slowly opened his eyes and saw that the beautiful woman he met in the eighth crater had landed in the ninth crater. You actually stayed in the ninth crater for half a day? The woman looked at Zhuowen with surprise in her beautiful eyes and spoke for the first time. She knew very well how terrifying the pressure in the ninth crater was. Even she could only cultivate here for 8 hours, but this guy could stay for half a day, which was beyond her expectations. I was just lucky, Zhuowen replied calmly. My name is Zhong Xinyan. Are you really an outer disciple? The woman took the initiative to report her name. Zhuowen nodded and said, Yes, my name is Zhuowen Xue. After that, Zhuowen closed his eyes again and did not intend to continue the conversation with the woman. Zhong Xinyan was quite tactful. Seeing that Zhuowen had resumed his cultivation, she found a random spot and began to cultivate as well. After 8 hours, Zhong Xinyan slowly opened her eyes. Her forehead was covered in cold sweat. Her face was pale, and her delicate body was trembling. 8 hours was already her limit. If she continued, her body would not be able to withstand the pressure here. When she looked at Zhuowen, she was surprised to find that Zhuowen was still sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. His breathing was calm, and he did not seem to be unable to hold on. Is this guy a monster? Seeing that Zhuowen was still persevering, Zhong Xinyan gritted her teeth and closed her eyes again to continue her cultivation. After an hour, Zhong Xinyan's body was drenched in sweat, revealing her seductive figure. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, trembling violently. Damn it, I've reached my limit. I can't walk anymore. I'll take out my identity token and activate the teleportation array to leave this place first. Zhong Xinyan was helpless. She could not even move now. She had to leave, or she would really die here. But when she touched her waist, she found that it was empty. She had forgotten to bring her identity token today. It's over. Zhong Xinyan suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, completely unconscious. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the sky and realized that night was about to fall. He stood up with a smile on his face. The primal chaos energy here was very dense and was very suitable for him to cultivate. According to his current speed, he would probably be able to break through to the spirit transformation intermediate stage in 10 days. Just as Zhuowen was about to leave, he noticed Zhong Xinyan lying on the ground with a weak aura. He was stunned. Zhong Xinyan had already reached her limit. Why hadn't she left yet? Zhuowen came to Zhong Xinyan's side and found that the latter had fainted. Her aura was extremely weak, and she was on the verge of death. Looks like it's not an act, Zhuowen thought for a while. Then, he carried Zhong Xinyan on his shoulder and jumped out of the ninth pit. When he returned to the stone room, he placed Zhong Xinyan to the side and walked in front of the old man. Senior, I've passed through the second group of sinkholes. I've passed through more than 10 sinkholes. I should be able to obtain a proof token now, right? Zhuowen said calmly. The old man sized up Zhuowen and straightforwardly took out a token and handed it to Zhuowen. This is the proof token. With this, you can enter the second level of the Mystical Abilities Pavilion. After Zhuowen received the proof token, he cupped his hands towards the old man and left without looking back. The old man looked at Zhong Xinyan who was lying on the ground, and Zhuowen, who had decisively left. He opened his mouth and wanted to ask Zhuowen if he wanted to take Zhong Xinyan away. However, Zhuowen left too quickly and disappeared in the blink of an eye. This child isn't simple. Is he really an outer disciple? Even Zhong Xinyan, who was ranked second in the inner court, was in such a miserable state. Yet, this fellow acted as if nothing had happened and even carried Zhong Xinyan out. The old man's eyes emitted an unbearable light as he muttered to himself. It seems that the Ascension sect is no longer as strong as before. They didn't even discover such a genius. But it's fine. I'll keep an eye on such a genius. Don't tell anyone else first, lest other sects covet him. After he finished speaking, the old man noticed that Zhong Xinyan had woken up. Zhong Xinyan's eyes were filled with confusion. She looked around and rubbed her head. She said in pain, "Where is this? Wasn't I in the 9th pit of the second group?" Senior, it's you. I've already left the sinkhole." Zhong Xinyan saw the old man and immediately sobered up. She exclaimed in surprise, "Zhong Xinyan, you're safe now. This time, it's all thanks to Zhuan Yinxue. Otherwise, you might have really died in the sinkhole." The old man said indifferently, "Zhuan Yinxue? Senior, are you talking about that outer disciple?" Zhong Xinyan recalled the outer disciple she met in the 9th pit. She still remembered that the fellow cultivated in the 9th pit for half a day with ease. In other words, it was that outer disciple who brought her out of the sinkhole. When the sun rose the next day, Zhuowen went to the Divine Abilities Pavilion early in the morning. "Elder Lianyu, this is the proof token. I can enter the 2nd level now, right?" Zhuowen handed the token he obtained from the old man to the manager of the Divine Abilities Pavilion, Lianyu. "What? You actually went through the first 2 groups of sinkholes?" Lianyu took the proof token and was in disbelief. She knew that the sinkhole was divided into groups of 9. In order to obtain a proof token, an outer disciple had to go through the first 2 groups of sinkholes. Inner disciple, on the other hand, could activate the teleportation array after entering the 10th pit because of the identity token. Lianyu looked at the back of the figure walking toward the 2nd level of the Divine Abilities Pavilion. Her beautiful eyes were filled with curiosity and interest. This outer disciple was not simple. It had only been a few days, and he had already obtained a proof token. This was something that even inner disciple could not do. After Zhuowen entered the 2nd level of the Divine Abilities Pavilion, he realized that there were significantly fewer divine abilities manuals on the 2nd level. Moreover, there were also significantly fewer disciples. Only inner disciple and above could enter the 2nd level of the Divine Abilities Pavilion. Therefore, those who could enter were basically inner disciple. There was not a single outer disciple in sight. When Zhuowen entered the 2nd level, he immediately attracted their attention. Zhuowen did not care about the strange gazes of the other inner disciple. Instead, he took the time to browse through the various divine abilities on the 2nd level. There were about 500 to 600 divine abilities manuals here. Basically, all of them were level 2 divine abilities. Zhuowen even found an incomplete level 3 divine ability in a corner. This was the only incomplete level 3 divine ability. It was called Bright Snow Spear. It was severely incomplete. Only the first half was left. When Zhuowen picked up the bright snow shackling spear, the supreme word stone in his divine soul instantly reacted. The purple energy materialized into a figure holding a spear. The figure began to dance continuously. When the figure finished practicing the first half of the bright snow spear, not only did it not stop, but it continued to practice the spear art. Furthermore, its spear art became more and more exquisite and terrifying. Chapter 3757. When Zhuowen finished digesting all the divine abilities on the 2nd floor of the Divine Abilities Pavilion, his primordial soldier mantra and primordial movement technique had both reached the peak of rank 3. In the Ascension sect, divine abilities of this level were considered important scriptures. It was difficult for inner disciples to learn them, and only core disciples could come into contact with them. Of course, if one had enough contribution points, even outer disciples could exchange for divine abilities of this level. However, the required contribution points were extremely terrifying, and it was definitely not something an ordinary cultivator could achieve. In addition, in the dangerous trial of the crater, after proving oneself, one could enter the corresponding floor of the Divine Abilities Pavilion and borrow the divine abilities of the corresponding level. Zhuan looked up and realized that it was getting late, so he was ready to leave the Divine Abilities Pavilion. When he walked out of the Divine Abilities Pavilion, he found Tang Hongmiao curled up outside. Beside Tang Hongmiao stood a young man with an overbearing bearing. Looking at his clothes, he should be an inner disciple. "Brother Tang, what's the matter?" Zhuan walked forward and greeted Tang Hongmiao. Brothers Tang Hongmiao looked at the young man beside him with fear, and he stopped talking. "You're Zhuan Yinxue? You don't look special, but senior brother and I, Zhu, personally issued a challenge to you. Where did you get the face to accept senior brother and I, Zhu's challenge? A piece of trash like you isn't qualified to fight with senior brother and I, Zhu." The young man's eyes were filled with arrogance as he walked out and blocked Zhuan's path. The entrance of the Divine Abilities Pavilion was originally a place filled with people, and there were many disciples. When a young man blocked Zhuan and wanted to find fault with him, many disciples stopped to watch the show. Even the Divine Abilities Pavilion's manager, Lin Yu, leaned against the door and watched with interest. It's inner disciple Yonghu. He's second only to the top 10 inner disciples. In terms of strength, he's ranked 11th in the inner sect. Why would such an expert suddenly block an outer disciple? Didn't you hear Yonghu's name? His name is Zhuo Yinxue. Wasn't there a rumor that Ni Zhu issued a death challenge to an outer disciple? That outer disciple's name is Zhuo Yinxue. F*CK, are you serious? Ni Zhu was an expert who was ranked 5th in the inner sect's top 10. Why would he issue a challenge to an outer sect disciple? Isn't this like using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken? The surrounding people were discussing incessantly. They looked at Zhuan with eyes that were filled with realization, curiosity, pity, and disdain. "You're saying that you want to fight me on Ni Zhu's behalf?" Zhuan asked indifferently. "Replace Ni Zhu? You think too highly of yourself. I came here to cripple your limbs, and when the death match starts tomorrow, I'll personally kill you. Why would I need senior brother Ni Zhu to do it?" Yonghu said with disdain. "I have no enmity with you, but you're going to kill me for Ni Zhu just because I offended him?" Zhuan squinted his eyes as his killing intent blazed. Hee, you're just an outer disciple. If it weren't for the sect's rules, I would have killed you right here and now. Yonghu sneered. "All right, I've wasted too much time talking to you. I'll break your limbs first before we talk." Yonghu snorted coldly. Just as he was about to attack, a beautiful figure blocked his way. "Yonghu, this is the Divine Abilities Pavilion. Don't mess around. If you insist on making a move, don't blame me for being impolite." This was an extremely beautiful young woman. Although she was wearing loose and simple sect clothes, it still couldn't hide her seductive figure. "Zhong Xinyan, why are you here?" The moment Yonghu saw this female disciple, his expression changed, and his eyes were filled with fear. Zhuan also looked at the woman in front of him in surprise. Wasn't she Zhong Xinyan who was unconscious in the crater yesterday? He was the one who carried her out and saved her life. "This is the Divine Abilities Pavilion. Why can't I be here?" Zhong Xinyan said indifferently. Yonghu said with an unfriendly expression, "Zhong Xinyan, I'm not causing trouble in the Divine Abilities Pavilion, but outside the pavilion. The sect doesn't have a rule that forbids sparring outside the Divine Abilities Pavilion. Could it be that you've taken a fancy to this kid and are here to help him?" After saying this, even Yonghu himself couldn't believe it. Zhong Xinyan was ranked second among the top 10 inner sect disciples. She was also very beautiful and had many suitors in the sect. Yonghu had fantasized about Zhong Xinyan before, but Zhong Xinyan's personality was cold, and she rejected all of her suitors. He knew that the number 1 inner sect genius, Cha Long, had been rejected by Zhong Xinyan before. How could she take a fancy to a mere outer sect trash? "Yes, I'm here to help him. If you really want to deal with him, then I'll have to make a move. As Zhong Xinyan spoke, she slowly pulled out the blue divine sword from her waist. Instantly, the sword intent spread out like ripples, and the surrounding air instantly became much colder. Yonghu's expression finally changed. He knew that Zhong Xinyan was serious. She really planned to make a move. You only know how to hide behind a woman. And I, Ju, will come out tomorrow. Since you've already accepted the life and death challenge, remember to come to the life and death arena. If you don't dare to come, break your arms and beg for forgiveness. Senior brother and I, Ju, will be soft-hearted and spare your worthless life. After Yonghu finished speaking, he left hatefully. On the other hand, the surrounding crowd was in an uproar. They all looked at Zhuowen with strange gazes. Zhong Xinyan's reputation in the Ascension sect was too great. She was a famous beauty, and her talent was extremely high. She was the goddess in the hearts of many male cultivators. Zhong Xinyan, who had always been cold, actually stood up for a mere outer sect disciple at this moment. They were truly shocked. Are you meddling in other people's business? I can easily deal with this kind of trash. You coming out is just an unnecessary move. Zhuowen shook his head. He didn't have any intention of expressing his gratitude. He walked past Zhong Xinyan and walked to Tang Hongmiao's side. Is there something wrong with this guy's head? Senior sister Zhong saved his life, and this guy actually pretended to be virtuous. He even said that he was meddling in other people's business. He's really giving advice after the fact. Damn it, this trash is really showing off. I want to beat him to death. He really took advantage of me, and now he's pretending to be innocent. Many of the surrounding male disciples were filled with indignation. They felt that Zhuowen really didn't understand the situation and still made sarcastic remarks. Zhong Xinyan's beautiful eyes looked at Zhuowen with a complicated expression. She recalled Zhuowen's heaven-defying performance in the crater and sighed softly. I was impulsive this time. Zhuanyin Xue, I apologize to you. At this moment, many of the surrounding male disciples who didn't know what was going on were confused. What's going on? Zhong Xinyan kindly saved Zhuanyin Xue, but not only did Zhuanyin Xue not appreciate it, she even made sarcastic remarks. What made them even more confused was that Zhong Xinyan actually lowered her head and apologized to Zhuanyin Xue. What was going on? Chapter 3758. Brother Zhue, that's Zhong Xinyan, the number 2 genius of the inner sect. She's both beautiful and powerful. She's publicly acknowledged as the number 1 beauty in the Ascension sect. She's already helped you so much, yet you're still so cold to her. Don't you think you're going overboard? Tang Hongmiao probed carefully on the way. Tang Hongmiao's attitude toward Zhuowen was becoming more and more cautious. The more he interacted with Zhuowen, the more he found Zhuowen to be unfathomable. Therefore, his attitude toward Zhuowen was no longer that of a friend. Instead, it was more like the attitude of a subordinate towards a superior. Zhuowen had long noticed the difference in Tang Hongmiao's attitude towards him, but he didn't say anything. She's more of a hindrance. If she didn't make a move, the one crippled would be Yonghu. Zhuowen said calmly. Tang Hongmiao's eyes flickered. In fact, he felt that Zhuowen was boasting. Although Zhuowen's performance in the Golem Cave was very good, and he even dealt with Ni Kai and Zhou Ji, who were among the top 10 Outer Sect disciples, they were still Outer Sect disciples after all. He knew that there was a huge gap in strength between Outer Sect disciples and Inner Sect disciples. Take Yonghu, for example. His cultivation was already at the late stage of the heaven-trampling change realm, and he could defeat both Zhou Ji and Ni Kai with one hand. Since Tang Hongmiao had never seen Zhuowen fight with an Inner Sect disciple, he guessed that Zhuowen was only at the level of an ordinary Inner Sect disciple. There was still a gap between him and Yonghu, let alone Ni Ju, who was stronger than Yonghu. Zhuowen naturally saw through Tang Hongmiao's thoughts. He smiled faintly and said, Brother Tang, you don't have to worry too much. The ones who should be afraid of tomorrow's battle should be Ni, Ju, and the others. Tang Hongmiao forced a smile, but he was getting more and more worried. Zhuowen didn't try to comfort him. After tomorrow, Tang Hongmiao would truly understand his strength. As night fell, Zhuowen stayed in his residence without sleep. He was digesting the various divine abilities that he had fused in the Divine Abilities Pavilion today. Although these divine abilities were fused with the Primordial Soldier Mantra and the Primordial Movement Technique, Zhuowen himself had thoroughly comprehended them. He could use all the divine abilities at his fingertips. Of course, the might of these divine abilities was definitely far inferior to the Grand Mist weapon formula and Grand Mist movement technique. The next day, at dawn, someone kicked open Zhuowen's door. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes and found that the person who had come was Eternal Tiger, who had provoked him yesterday. "Trash, why haven't you come out yet? Senior brother and I, Ju, is waiting for you in the life and death arena." Yonghu sneered. Zhuowen slowly stood up. When his cold gaze landed on Yonghu, the latter's body couldn't help but stiffen. By the time Yonghu reacted, Zhuowen had already arrived beside him at some point. "Why aren't you leading the way?" Zhuowen's cold voice came slowly. Yonghu's pupils shrank. He hadn't noticed when Zhuowen had arrived beside him. This guy. Yonghu's hair stood on end. He realized that he had underestimated this person's strength. "I say, why aren't you leading the way?" Zhuowen spoke once again. A terrifying and overbearing aura burst out from his body and surged toward Yonghu like a tide. Plop! Yonghu sat on the ground. He was completely frightened by this aura. You. Yonghu swallowed his saliva. The fear in his heart could no longer be concealed. Although Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the spirit transformation stage, his strength was much stronger than Yonghu's. Furthermore, he had been training in the heavenly pit for the past few days. Thus, his body was releasing the terrifying pressure of the heavenly pit. "I don't like to repeat myself 3 times. Zhuowen spoke once again. Yonghu finally came back to his senses. He quickly stood up and obediently led the way. Brother Zhuo, you must be careful." Tang Hongmiao also walked out of his room. When he saw Yonghu bringing Zhuowen out, he spoke with a complicated gaze. "Brother Tang, follow me to the life and death arena." Zhuowen lightly smiled. Tang Hongmiao nodded and immediately agreed. He followed closely behind Zhuowen. Along the way, Zhuowen and Tang Hongmiao chatted casually. However, Yonghu, who was leading the way, did not say a word. If one looked carefully, they would be able to see that Yonghu's body was faintly trembling, as if he was afraid of something. The journey to the life and death arena was extremely long for Yonghu. The life and death arena was located at the top of Tianju Cliff in the Ascension sect. Tianju Cliff was also a training ground for the Ascension sect. Furthermore, this place was much more popular than the Heavenly Pit. The main reason was that the difficulty of the Tianju Cliff's training was moderate. It was not as difficult as the Heavenly Pit, where it was easy to lose one's life. Therefore, most of the Ascension sect's disciples chose to train at Tianju Cliff. At this moment, Tianju Cliff was even more popular than before. This was because today was a special day. Someone was going to fight in the life and death arena. Although the life and death arena was set up on Tianju Cliff, very few people would fight in the life and death arena. After all, there were only a few disciples who had a life and death grudge. Once someone fought in the life and death arena, it would attract many disciples to watch. At the top of the cliff, on the life and death arena, Ju sat cross-legged on a rock with his eyes closed. On his legs, there was a divine sword quietly lying on the ground. This is the first time in 3 years that someone is going to the life and death arena. Furthermore, one of them is the inner sect's 5th strongest expert, Ju. This is really rare. Isn't that so? I also heard that Ju's opponent is only an outer sect disciple. There's really no suspense in this battle. That outer sect disciple is really unlucky. He actually offended Ju. This time he's dead for sure. Many disciples around Tianju Cliff were discussing animatedly. They all had a pitiful attitude towards the outer sect disciple who had yet to appear. He could have offended anyone, but he actually offended one of the inner sect's top 10 experts, Ju. Hee. With Big Brother and I Ju here, that Zhuo Nianxue will die even if she doesn't. Ni Kai's arms were wrapped in bandages as she hid on a rock wall around Tianju Cliff. Beside her were Furong and Lu Yongwang. As Wei Zi's injuries were too severe, he was still lying on the sickbed. This Zhuo Nianxue is overestimating herself. She really did accept the life and death challenge. Does she really think that she can compete with the 10 great inner sect disciples just because she defeated us? She's really looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. Furong echoed. Lu Yongwang's eyes were filled with arrogance as he said, "What a pity. Originally, I was willing to personally deal with that arrogant Zhuo Nianxue for junior sister and I Kai. However, senior brother and I Ju was still one step ahead of me. It's not good for me to compete with senior brother and I Ju for this limelight." Ni Kai's beautiful eyes revealed a strange light as she looked at Lu Yongwang and said, "Senior brother Lu is right. With your Dao root, you will definitely be an influential figure in the Ascension sect in the future. Senior brother Lu, you don't have to trouble yourself to deal with a small fry like Zhuo Nianxue." Lu Yongwang's Dao root was of a higher level than Ni Ju's. He was extremely talented. After entering the inner sect, he received the attention of many elders. Ni Kai heard all this from Ni Ju. Therefore, she was trying her best to curry favor with Lu Yongwang. After all, Lu Yongwang's achievements in the future would definitely be above her brother's. Lu Yongwang faintly smiled as his eyes revealed a pleased expression. However, he didn't take a few more glances at Ni Kai. Instead, he focused most of his attention on a beautiful figure not far away from Tianju Cliff. That figure attracted the attention of many male disciples at Tianju Cliff. She was the inner sect's number 2 genius, Zhong Xinyan. Ni Ju slowly opened his eyes and looked down at the only path below Tianju Cliff. Chapter 3759. When Zhuowen and the other two arrived in front of the life and death stage, Ni Ju slowly stood up. He did not notice the unnatural expression on Yonghu's face as he focused all of his attention on Zhuowen, especially when he saw that Zhuowen's aura was only in the spirit transformation stage. A trace of disdain flashed in his eyes. Although this kind of cultivation was considered strong among the outer disciples, it was only ordinary among the inner disciples, not to mention Ni Ju. "I'm very surprised by your courage. Considering the huge gap between you and me, I told Yonghu to tell you, right? Break your arms and come here to apologize. Then, I will consider letting you live. Right now, this condition is still valid." Ni Ju's voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with an unquestionable arrogance. Senior brother Ni Ju is truly benevolent. He actually intends to let this person go. Break my arms? If Zhuo Nianxue really did that, then he would be crippled and wouldn't be able to stay in the Ascension sect anymore. But a bad life is better than a good death. I believe that Zhuo Nianxue will agree to this condition. Many disciples around the heavenly precipice heard Ni Ju's words and started to discuss with ridicule in their eyes. They were all waiting to see Zhuo Nianxue make a fool of herself. Zhong Xinyan silently watched all of this. After hearing Ni Ju's words, she gently shook her head. She was well aware of Zhuowen's strength. Even she might not be his opponent, not to mention Ni Ju. In Zhong Xinyan's opinion, Zhuowen's strength should be comparable to a core disciple. Zhuowen's gaze was calm as he stepped onto the life and death stage and said indifferently, "I only need one move to deal with trash like you. There's no need for me to apologize to you." As soon as he said those words, the surrounding noise instantly stopped. Strange gazes were cast onto Zhuowen's body. Those gazes were filled with doubt and pity. Immediately after, everyone roared with laughter. They felt that Zhuowen's words were simply too laughable. There should be a limit to boasting, right? Ni Ju laughed out loud, but his eyes turned even colder as he said, "You've got guts. You actually dare to boast in front of me. Are you tired of living?" Before Ni Ju could finish his sentence, his voice stopped abruptly as Zhuowen disappeared in front of him. By the time he reacted, Zhuowen had already appeared in front of him, and a sharp pain came from his chest. Zhuowen's right hand clenched into a fist. His entire body was emitting a strange purple light, and it landed right on his chest. Pucci! Eniju spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward like a falling leaf. Zhuowen, on the other hand, stood where he was. His entire body was shrouded in a strange purple light. What was even more strange was that there were illusory images of weapons floating around his body. The moment Eniju was thrown out, the illusory images of weapons around him shot out like arrows and blasted into Eniju's body. Eniju was still in midair, and he was still in a daze. When the illusory images of weapons landed on his body, a bloody mist burst out. The intense pain caused him to shriek miserably. When Eniju's shriek came to an abrupt end, his body exploded and turned into a rain of blood that sprinkled on the top of Tianjue Cliff and the life and death ring. The entire area around Heavenly Precipice Cliff was silent. It was so quiet that it was too strange. All the spectating disciples stood there motionless, as if time had stopped. They quietly watched all of this, watching this unbelievable scene. Eniju, the genius disciple who was ranked 5th in the intersect, was defeated in one move. Moreover, his body and soul were destroyed. He couldn't be more dead. So powerful. Zhong Xinyan stared blankly at the scene and couldn't help but mutter to herself. She had already thought that she had overestimated Zhuan Ninshue's strength, but now she realized that she had underestimated her by a long way. Enai Kai, Furong, and Lu Yongwang froze on the spot, as if they had been possessed. The three of them couldn't accept such an outcome at all. How could Zhuan Ninshu be so powerful? She was too powerful. Yonghu, who was standing not far away from the life and death ring, was already paralyzed on ground. His body was trembling, and even moving was difficult for him. He felt deep regret and fear. He actually wanted to find trouble with this jinx and cripple his limbs. Wasn't he digging his own grave? Fortunately, Zhong Xinyan stopped him. Otherwise, his current situation wouldn't be any better than Eniju's. Brother Zhua. Is he really Brother Zhua? How did he become so powerful? Tang Hongmiao was stunned on the spot. He looked at the figures standing quietly on the life and death ring with a complicated gaze. Zhua Wen's eyes lit up. He had just used the primordial soldier formula. He had killed Eniju, who was at the advanced stage of the heaven-trampling change realm, without even using its full power. If he used its full power, he might be able to fight against an early-stage, void, god transformation realm cultivator. Moreover, the primordial soldier formula was far from its peak. It was only at the peak of the 3rd rank. When it evolved in the future, its power would be even more terrifying. At this moment, Zhuan gave him a strange feeling. It was as if he was suffocating. Ah, Brother Eniju. No, Zhuan Yinxue, you bastard. How dare you kill Brother Eniju? He was an inner disciple. You killed an inner disciple. This is a capital offense. Death. Enai Kai seemed to have lost her mind as she pounced on the life and death ring. She had completely collapsed and lost all rationality. The only thought left in her mind was to avenge Eniju. Furong and Lu Yongwang didn't even have time to react before Enai Kai had already jumped onto the life and death ring. Once you're on the life and death ring, your life is in my hands. Zhuo Wen's gaze was terrifyingly calm as he watched Enai Kai pounce on him. He then flicked his finger and a purple energy shot out. It shot out like a bullet and hit Enai Kai between her eyebrows. Puffed. Enai Kai was like a kite with a broken string as she flew out and smashed into the ground below the life and death ring. Blood spurted out from between her eyebrows. Her face was pale, and she was on the verge of death. It was obvious that she wouldn't live for long. This person is so powerful and decisive. Many disciples at the heavenly cliff looked at Zhuo Wen with fear in their eyes. They had already labeled him as a dangerous person that they couldn't afford to offend. Chapter 3760. Yong, who was so scared that he almost suffocated. His eyes were wide open as he stared at Zhuowen. He knelt on the ground decisively and begged for mercy. Senior brother Zhuowen, Yong who knows his mistake. It was Yong who did not recognize Mount Tai yesterday. Please spare Yong, whose dog life. All right, I'll give you a chance to live. Now get on the life and death ring. I'll only cripple one of your arms, and then get out of here, Zhuowen said calmly. He had never been someone who would settle things peacefully. Yong had provoked him time and time again, so he would not treat it as if nothing had happened. Those who humiliate others will be humiliated by others. Yonghu's eyes flickered and he began to hesitate. Zhuowen's condition was too much. As an inner disciple who was second only to the top 10 experts, how could he be humiliated like this? Then cripple both of your arms and get out of here. Zhuowen saw that Yonghu was hesitating and spoke again. His voice was filled with unquestionable authority. Yonghu panicked. He knew that he could not hesitate anymore. Thus, under everyone's gaze, he rolled out of the ring and onto the ring. The disciples of Tianju Cliff were dumbfounded. This was Yonghu. He had always been overbearing and ruthless towards others. He had never backed down. But today, under this person's order, he actually rolled onto the life and death ring. Zhuowen did not speak anymore and only looked at Yonghu indifferently. Feeling Zhuowen's gaze, Yonghu shouted loudly. In front of everyone, he channeled his broken divine power and destroyed the meridians in his hands. Puchi! Yonghu's arms burst out into a bloody mist. Then, Yonghu screamed and fell to the ground. His body was twitching. Now you can get out of here, Zhuowen said calmly. Yonghu's eyes were filled with humiliation, but he still obediently followed Zhuowen's request and rolled down the life and death ring. Then, he left Tianju Cliff in a panic. At this moment, he was too embarrassed. How could he have the face to continue staying? Zhuowen stood on the life and death ring. His gaze casually swept and landed on Lu Yonwang and Furong. Lu Yonwang and Furong were both shocked. Their foreheads were full of sweat. The person in front of them was a fearless person. Even Ni Ju and Ni Kai had died in his hands, so they didn't dare to provoke him. Plop! Lu Yonwang hurriedly pulled Furong to kneel on the ground and said loudly, Senior Zhua, during the entrance test, we were rude to you. Please don't take it to heart. We apologize to you now. Zhuowen silently watched Lu Yongxiang and Furong's actions. After a while, he slowly opened his mouth and said, The person you should be apologizing to isn't me, but Brother Tang. Lu Yonwang reacted very quickly. He pulled Furong towards Tang Hongmiao, knelt on the ground, and apologized in a low voice. Tang Hongmiao's gaze was complicated. He waved his hand, not intending to pursue Lu Yonwang's rude behavior. It was very clear that Lu Yong's willingness to apologize to him was not sincere. It was only because he was afraid of Zhuowen's power. Zhuowen surveyed the surroundings of Tianju Cliff, and all the disciples who met his gaze all lowered their heads, not daring to look him in the eye. Brother Tang, let's go. After scanning the surroundings, Zhuowen jumped down from the life and death arena. Under the respectful gazes of the crowd, he brought Tang Hongmiao and left Tianju Cliff openly. What a terrifying guy. This guy can't even be considered an outer court disciple. If he said he was a core disciple, there would be people who would believe him. Zhong Xinyan looked at Zhuowen's departing figure with a complicated expression as she muttered to herself. Tang Hongmiao silently followed behind Zhuowen, not saying a word the entire way. Brother Tang, do you know why Yong, who was willing to listen to my orders and roll onto the life and death arena to break his own arms and roll off? And why did Lu Yonwang and Furong kneel down and apologize to me because of my gaze? Zhuowen did not even turn his head as he asked indifferently. Tang Hongmiao raised his head and stared at Zhuowen's back. After pondering for a moment, he said, Because you're stronger than them. Yes, you're right. I'm stronger than them, so I'm their rule. When you're strong enough, you'll be able to control the rules. Imperceptibly, there will be people who will get close to you, follow you, and even fear you. I know you feel inferior because my strength is stronger than yours. You don't even know how to get along with me. However, you just need to know one thing. You're my friend. This is the primordial technique. Take it and cultivate it. It will be the opportunity for you to quickly become stronger. Zhuowen stopped, took out a jade slip, and passed it to Tang Hongmiao. Recorded within the jade slip was the primordial technique that Zhuowen had created by referring to the primordial technique when he was in the lower realms. The might of the primordial technique was indeed far inferior to the original primordial technique, but it was much stronger than many cultivation techniques. Moreover, this cultivation technique did not have a requirement of Dao root. Even if one did not have Dao root, they could still cultivate it. Tang Hongmiao's Dao root was very inferior, so his progress in cultivating the Ascension Sect's cultivation technique was very slow. He might not be able to break through the heavens in his lifetime. But the primordial technique was different. Cultivating this cultivation technique could rapidly increase one's comprehension ability. The more one cultivated it, the faster one's cultivation speed would be. It was an extremely terrifying cultivation technique. Of course, Zhuowen didn't give the primordial technique to Tang Hongmiao out of sympathy or any other emotions. It was also for the purpose of experimenting. He wanted to experiment and see if the primordial technique was suitable for others besides him to cultivate. Was it true that the worse one's Dao root was, the easier it would be to cultivate this cultivation technique? If it was true, then wouldn't it mean that mortals without Dao root would be the best choice to cultivate the primordial technique? If it was true, then perhaps the plan in Zhuowen's heart could be carried out. It was a plan that could truly allow him to gain a foothold in the outer realms and swiftly spread his forces. Because mortals were the most numerous in the outer realms, and they far outnumbered cultivators. Once the primordial technique could be cultivated by mortals, then Zhuowen would have the foundation to rope in all the mortals and establish a powerful force. And once this plan was realized, the entire structure of the outer realms would probably be broken by Zhuowen. Time gradually passed, and in the blink of an eye, 2 months had already passed. In these 2 months, Zhuowen had passed through the fourth group's sinkhole, and his cultivation had advanced to the peak of the spirit transformation stage. He was only half a step away from advancing to the heaven trampling transformation stage. He had also successfully obtained the second proof token and entered the third level of the mystical abilities pavilion. Moreover, he had integrated all the mystical abilities on the third level into the primordial soldier mantra and primordial technique. This allowed the 2 mystical abilities to advance again and reach the peak of the fourth stage. Their power could be said to be extremely terrifying. Originally, Zhuowen thought that passing through the fourth group's sinkhole would definitely attract the attention of the sect's upper echelons. However, to Zhuowen's surprise, there was no movement from the sect. He vaguely guessed that it might have something to do with the old man guarding the sinkhole. It should be that the old man had concealed what happened in the sinkhole for him. As for what the old man's motive was, Zhuowen did not know. On the contrary, the old man's attitude towards him became more and more amiable, and he spoke more and more. Even the administrator of the Mystical Abilities Pavilion, Lin Yu, who had always had a bad attitude, had changed her attitude toward Zhuowen. To be more precise, she valued Zhuowen more. However, Zhuowen did not think too much about it. He had been immersed in his cultivation state, and it felt as if he did not pay attention to what was happening outside. Chapter 3761. The arrival of the Nangong family and the Murong family had shaken the entire Ascension sect. Regardless of whether it was the outer disciples, inner disciples, or core disciples, all of them were discussing the news. Zhuowen, on the other hand, was still cultivating in the sinkhole. He was trying to break through to the heaven transformation stage. Furthermore, he did not pay attention to gossip and was not good at socializing. Therefore, he was not aware of the news. Of course, even if he knew, he would not care. Although he knew that the Nangong family and the Murong family had come for him, unfortunately, he had entered the Ascension sect under an alias. Even if the Nangong family and the Murong family wanted him, the Ascension sect would not be able to find a disciple by the name of Zhuowen. On the main peak of the Ascension sect, the sect leader, Li Yuan Feng, had gathered the elders to discuss countermeasures. Sect leader, the Murong family and the Nangong family have sent people here at the same time. It seems that the two families have discussed this beforehand. Furthermore, I heard that the Murong family's leader is Elder Ingyin, while the Nangong family's leader is Nangong Haoga. I'm afraid that they've come with ill intentions. An elder stood up. His gaze was unpleasant as he spoke in a deep voice. Since this elder had started the discussion, the other elders present began to discuss spiritedly and express their opinions. Li Yuanfeng gestured for them to keep quiet and sighed softly. The Murong family and the Nangong family have sent people here because of a disciple of our Ascension sect. It's said that this disciple is audacious and has stolen the star weapon fragments from the two families. In order to avoid being hunted down by the two families, he hid in our Ascension sect. The crowd burst into an uproar when they heard this. What? No wonder the two families have mobilized so many people. So they're here to catch a thief. This thief is really despicable. He actually hid in our Ascension sect. Sect leader, we can't let this guy off so easily. The elders present all had different opinions, but their thoughts were the same. They had to find that thief and stop him from slandering the Ascension Gate. After all, both the Nangong family and the Murong family were not inferior to the Ascension sect in terms of power and foundation. In fact, they were even slightly stronger. Now that the two families had joined forces, the higher-ups of the Ascension sect were panicking. After all, the Ascension sect was no match for the power of the two families. Thus, when they learned that the two clans had joined hands and did not come to target the Ascension School, they heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts. By the way, Sect Master, who are the people the two clans want? Someone's words immediately attracted everyone's attention. This person's problem was also their problem. From the messages that Elder Ingyin and Nangong Haoga sent me, I heard that this person's name is Zhuowen. This is his profile picture. If you know this person, report it to me immediately. As Li Yuanfeng spoke, he took out a crystal ball and projected a clear image on it. The figure of a young man with a calm expression was displayed on the virtual image. The gazes of all the elders fell on the projection. Only one person's expression changed slightly when he heard Zhuowen's name, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. She was Elder Yuchi. Back in Yunjin Ridge, she had competed with Zhuowen and lost to Zhuowen. That Zhuowen actually has an astral weapon fragment in his hands. Who exactly is he? Elder Yuchi pondered in her heart and was filled with curiosity about Zhuowen's identity. Back then, Zhuowen had used the half-moon divine fire spear to defeat her in the end. He was clearly only in the divine transformation of the fetus realm, but he could possess a level 4 heaven-breaking divine weapon. Moreover, he could use such a divine weapon beyond his level. It was truly unbelievable. After she brought Lu Miaojin away, she had actually asked Lu Miaojin about Zhuowen's background. According to Lu Miaojin, Zhuowen had just come from the lower realm and was saved by her. He was unfamiliar with the 100 domains outside the lower realm. As for more information, Lu Miaojin was not too sure. However, Elder Yuchi guessed that Zhuowen did not come from the lower realm. This person's background was definitely not simple. Moreover, he was so bold that he dared to steal the astral weapon fragments from the Murong and Nangong families. How could a living being from the lower realm have such courage and strength? From Elder Yuchi's point of view, it should be an excuse made up by Zhuowen. That Zhuowen has the token that I gave him. If he really comes to the Ascension sect, he will definitely bring my token to report. However, I haven't received any news during this period of time. I'm afraid that Zhuowen is not in the Ascension sect. Elder Yuchi's eyes flickered. She did not intend to provide this information to Li Yuanfeng. Although Zhuowen's attitude was not very good back then, and he had even defeated her, she did not have a good impression of him. However, her impression of Zhuowen was not bad. At least, Zhuowen knew how to repay kindness. He was even more courteous to Lu Miaojin, who had saved his life. From Elder Yuchi's point of view, since Zhuowen was not in the Ascension sect, the people from the Murong and Nangong families would naturally not make things difficult for the Ascension sect. When the time came, they would naturally leave. 3 days later, two giant divine ships soared through the sky and arrived near the Sky Dragon mountain range where the Ascension sect was located. Elder Yin, I heard that when you led people to encircle and annihilate that Zhuan last time, you were covered in dust and dirt and almost died. That was truly humiliating. At the front of the Nangong family's divine ship's deck, a tall, middle-aged man clad in armor had his hands crossed in front of his chest. He cast a sidelong glance at an old man who was similarly standing at the front of the divine ship's deck and spoke in an ambiguous tone. This middle-aged man was naturally the leader of the Nangong family's team, Nangong Hauga. As for the old man at the front of the Murong family's divine ship's deck, he was naturally Elder Yin who had failed to encircle and annihilate Zhuan last time. Elder Yin's face darkened. He coldly said, Nangong Hauga, no one will treat you as a mute if you don't speak. If you were to face the might of a rank 2 astral weapon fragment, would you be able to remain unscathed? Nangong Hauga coldly smiled and said, I'm not like you. Our Nangong family has already made preparations to deal with that brat. If we want to deal with a rank 2 astral weapon, we can only use a rank 2 astral weapon. Elder Yin coldly snorted and said, Do you think that only your Nangong family can take out a rank 2 astral weapon? Our Murong family has also made preparations for this. Also, our mission this time is to bring back that Zhuan. As for the things on this person's body, how about our two families decide the ownership according to the old rules? Nangong Hauga grinned and said, There's nothing we can do about it. After all, our family's patriarch has already reached an agreement with your Murong family. Nangong Hauga also understood that if they were both rank 2 astral weapons, it wouldn't be a simple matter to quickly determine the victor. However, if two rank 2 astral weapons were to deal with one rank 2 astral weapon, then they would basically win. They had already anticipated that after Zhuan's whereabouts were exposed, they would definitely fight to the death. If any of them were to face him alone, they would inevitably have to fight bitterly. However, if the two of them were to join hands, it wouldn't be a problem at all. Elder Yin, if the Ascension sect were to know that Zhuan possesses a rank 2 astral weapon, do you think they would make a move to snatch him? Nangong Hauga asked with a frown. The message they sent to the Ascension sect's patriarch mentioned that Zhuan possessed a rank 1 astral weapon fragment, but it was only a rank 1 astral weapon fragment. The Ascension sect also possessed a few rank 1 astral weapon fragments. Therefore, the Ascension sect wouldn't take the risk of offending the two families and monopolize Zhuan. Chapter 3762. Although the Ascension sect was one of the 5 sects, it was ranked last among the 5 sects. It did not have a rank 2 astral weapon fragment. If they knew that Zhuan had a rank 2 astral weapon fragment, they would definitely snatch it even if they had to fall out with the two sections. Haha, the Ascension sect wouldn't dare to do that. They don't have a rank 2 astral weapon. So what if they snatch this rank 2 astral weapon? Can he withstand the wrath of our two sects? Moreover, if the Ascension sect really snatches it, it will give our two sects an excuse to fight the Ascension sect. As long as Li Yuanfeng isn't a fool, he won't attack even if he knows that Zhuan has a rank 2 astral weapon fragment. Elder Yin smiled faintly. That's true, Nangong Hauga said faintly. At this moment, the clouds surrounding the Ascension sect gradually dispersed, revealing the magnificent mountain gate of the Ascension sect. Elder Yin and Nangong Hauga knew that the Ascension sect had removed the protective mountain array after knowing of their arrival. A group of people walked out from the mountain gate of the Ascension sect. The person in the lead was naturally the sect master of the Ascension sect, Li Yuanfeng. Brother Yin, Brother Hauga, sorry to keep you waiting. Please come in. Li Yuanfeng made an inviting gesture to the two of them. Elder Yin and Nangong Hauga kept the divine ship and followed Li Yuanfeng into the Ascension sect with their respective teams. Along the way, many disciples of the Ascension sect observed this group of people from afar. They knew that only the Murong family and Nangong family could make Li Yuanfeng personally come out to welcome them. Sect Master Li, it has been many years since we last met. Your cultivation has improved again. Elder Yin started a chat with Li Yuanfeng. He sensed Li Yuanfeng's aura and realized that it was even stronger than his. His gaze immediately turned serious. Haha, Brother Yin, you are too polite. Your improvement is the greatest. My improvement is still a little lacking compared to yours, Li Yuanfeng said with a smile. Nangong Haoge was a little impatient. He said softly, Sect Master Li, you should know why we are here, right? We have come here to ask for someone. May I know if there is someone called Zhuowen in your Ascension sect? Li Yuanfeng was a little embarrassed. When the two patriarchs sent me the message, I immediately ordered the elders to investigate the names of everyone in the sect. I'm really sorry, but we didn't find anyone called Zhuowen in the sect. Elder Yin and Nangong Haoge exchanged glances, their expressions not looking too good. Sect Leader Li, both of our sects have already investigated. Back then, Zhuowen did indeed come for your Ascension sect. Moreover, ever since he entered your Ascension sect, that Zhuowen has never appeared anywhere else. Sect Leader Li, is it because you didn't investigate carefully enough, causing the results to be a little off? Elder Yin said with a smile. Li Yuanfeng frowned slightly. He was a little displeased. From his point of view, it wasn't a big deal that Zhuowen had stolen a rank 1 astral weapon from the Murong family and Nangong family. Weren't the people that the two sects had arranged a little too much? He had indeed sent people to investigate carefully. There was no such person as Zhuowen. However, these two people actually didn't believe him and even questioned him. They didn't put him, the sect leader, in their eyes at all. Elder Yin, I, Li Yuanfeng, will definitely not be careless about the things that your two sects have requested of me. If you still don't believe me, I can't do anything about it. Li Yuanfeng's tone was a little cold. Elder Yin and Nangong Haoge exchanged glances. Nangong Haoge secretly transmitted his voice. From Li Yuanfeng's tone, it doesn't seem like he's lying. Could it be that Zhuowen really isn't in the Ascension sect? Elder Yin said in a deep voice, That's not very possible. When that Zhuowen entered the Ascension sect, the Nangong family sent out many people to monitor him. No one saw that Zhuowen left the Ascension sect. Furthermore, before coming, I had already asked Spirit Master Yin to make a prediction. That Zhuowen is indeed still in the Ascension sect. Nangong Haoge nodded and said, I also asked Spirit Master Yin to make a prediction. That Zhuowen is indeed still in the Ascension sect. Could it be that this Li Yuanfeng really dares to lie to us? Li Yuanfeng wouldn't go so far as to offend our two sects for one person. Right now, the most likely thing should be that Zhuowen has entered the Ascension sect, but he's using another identity. Elder Yin said. Nangong Haoge narrowed his eyes and said with a slight headache, If that's the case, then it's really troublesome. There's so many people in the Ascension sect. How are we going to find that Zhuowen if he sneaks in? Elder Yin slightly raised the corner of his mouth and said, We don't need to find him. That Zhuowen will take the initiative to find us. Nangong Haoge looked at Elder Yin in astonishment and asked, What do you mean? I've already understood. That Zhuowen killed Murong Fugue and Murong Rue consecutively for the sake of Yunjin territory. It can be seen that he's a righteous person, and in the Ascension sect, there's a benefactor who saved his life. As long as we have that person in our hands, then release the news. That Zhuowen will definitely do something. Elder Yin smiled faintly and said, Nangong Haoge said with some disbelief, Is there really such a person in this world? That guy is really willing to give up his life for the sake of friendship? Elder Yin smiled and said, Even if that guy doesn't dare to come, he'll definitely give himself away. At that time, with Li Yuanfeng's assistance, we can also find out who the real Zhuowen is. Isn't this killing two birds with one stone? Nangong Haoge nodded and felt that Elder Yin's plan was not bad. Then who is that Zhuowen's benefactor that you mentioned? Nangong Haoge asked. I only know that she's called Lu Miaojin. She's an inner sect disciple who just joined the Ascension sect not long ago. It said that she even has the spiritual water root. At this point, Elder Yin's eyes revealed a strange brilliance. Nangong Haoga also revealed a strange expression and muttered to himself, "It's actually the spiritual water root. Looks like our luck is not bad." When Li Yuanfeng brought Elder Yin and Nangong Haoga into the main Peak's guest hall, Elder Yin stood up and cupped his fist towards Li Yuanfeng. "Sect Master Li, since your Ascension sect doesn't have a person called Zhuowen, then forget it. However, we still have a condition. We still want to ask for a person from your Ascension sect." Li Yuanfeng frowned slightly and said with extreme displeasure, "Who is it?" Although his Ascension sect couldn't be compared to the two great aristocratic families, it was still one of the 5 great sections. These two people had already made Li Yuanfeng unhappy when they came up to ask for a person. Now that the person they wanted hadn't been found, and they actually wanted another person, this was a little too much. However, when Li Yuanfeng considered the strength of the Nangong and Murong families, he still suppressed this anger. Your Ascension sect has an intersect disciple called Lu Miaozhen, right? We want this person. Nangong Haoga said calmly. When these words came out, Li Yuanfeng frowned and couldn't help but cast his gaze towards Elder Yuqi, who was in a corner not far away from the guest hall. The other elders' actions were also surprisingly consistent, and they all looked towards Elder Yuqi. Chapter 3763. Elder Yuqi, who had been sitting quietly in the corner of the parlor, stood up abruptly when she heard Nangong Haoga calling for her disciple, Lu Miaozhen. Elder Ingyan glanced coldly at Elder Yuqi and said indifferently, "Sect Master Li, is there a problem? You should know that both of our families have come with sincerity. This time, we've taken out a heaven-breaking rank 3 divine artifact as a thank you gift. I don't think Sect Master Li will reject us just like that. Let's go outside." In the parlor, many elders were moved. There weren't many heaven-breaking rank 3 divine artifacts in their Ascension sect. They could be said to be extremely precious. The Nangong family and the Murong family each took out a heaven-breaking rank 3 divine artifact. Their value far exceeded that of an inner disciple. "Sect Master, I think Elder Yin and the Murong brothers must have their reasons for calling out the person they want. Although Lu Miaozhen is a disciple of our Ascension sect, I'm afraid that she has done some sneaky things before coming here. Otherwise, Elder Yin and the Murong brothers wouldn't want her." "Yes, 7th Elder is right. Lu Miaozhen is definitely not a good person. I suggest that we expel her from the Ascension sect and let Elder Yin and the Murong brothers deal with her themselves." Immediately, all the elders spoke up and agreed to hand over Lu Miaozhen. In front of the temptation of 2 heaven-breaking rank 3 divine artifacts, they chose to sacrifice their disciple without hesitation. Elder Yuqi looked at this scene in disbelief. None of these senior and junior brothers who had worked with her for many years were standing on her side at this moment. In order to curry favor with Elder Yin and Murong Haoga, they unscrupulously sold out her disciple. "Sect Master, Miaozhen is my disciple and also a disciple of the Ascension sect." Elder Yuqi looked at Li Yuanfeng with a pleading look in her beautiful eyes. She knew that all of this was in Li Yuanfeng's hands. As long as Li Yuanfeng rejected Elder Yin and Murong Haoga, Lu Miaozhen's fate could be changed. Li Yuanfeng didn't even look at Elder Yuqi. Instead, he chatted cheerfully with Elder Yin and Murong Haoga. "I see the sincerity of the 2 of you. I will order someone to bring Lu Miaozhen here." Li Yuanfeng said with a faint smile. Elder Yuqi's pupil shrank. Her face was filled with disbelief as she stared blankly at Li Yuanfeng. At this moment, she felt that the sect master that she had always respected seemed to have changed into another person. He was so unfamiliar and cold. "Yuqi, Lu Miaozhen is your disciple. Go and bring her here now." Li Yuanfeng instructed Elder Yuqi indifferently. Elder Yuqi lowered her head and remained silent for a while. Then she sighed dejectedly and said, "Sect Master, I understand. I'll bring Miaozhen over right now." As she spoke, Elder Yuqi left the guest hall without even bidding farewell. In order to prevent junior sister Yuchi from being swayed by her emotions, First Elder, go and supervise her. Don't make any mistakes. Li Yuanfeng said to an old man sitting next to him. The old man nodded, stood up, disappeared from his seat. Waterdrop Peak was Elder Yuchi's cultivation peak. In the Ascension Gate, all the elders who had some strength would have their own cultivation mountain. On Waterdrop Peak, in a rather luxurious courtyard, a young girl dressed in white sat cross-legged on a praying mat. As the young girl breathed, the surrounding water element suddenly became denser. It was as if countless invisible water vapor were rapidly evaporating into the air. Soon, an illusory tide was formed in the sky. Miaojin is about to break through again. In the corner of the courtyard, an old man silently watched the young girl in white sitting cross-legged as she cultivated. The old man was Medicine Master Lu, and the young girl in white was Medicine Master Lu's granddaughter, Lu Miaojin. After Elder Yuchi brought the two of them back to the Ascension sect, they immediately stayed on Waterdrop Peak. Lu Miaojin's talent was so strong that it exceeded Elder Yuchi's expectations. In a short span of a few months, Lu Miaojin had continuously broken through. She had broken through from the third blight to the peak of the fifth blight in one go. Now, Lu Miaojin had entered a state of enlightenment. She was about to break through again and attempt to break through the heavens. Medicine Master Lu's gaze was extremely solemn. Although he was only a mortal, he knew how terrifying a heaven-crushing tribulation was. If Lu Miaojin broke through now, the heaven-crushing tribulation would directly descend on Waterdrop Peak. At that time, all the disciples on Waterdrop Peak would suffer. Just as Medicine Master Lu was faintly worried, Lu Miaojin slowly opened her eyes. Miaojin, how are you? I thought you were about to break through immediately. Seeing Lu Miaojin open her eyes, Medicine Master Lu hurried forward and inquired about her well-being. Lu Miaojin smiled faintly and said, Grandfather, if I wanted to break through just now, I could have done so immediately. However, I considered that this is Waterdrop Peak. If I broke through like this and attracted the heaven-crushing tribulation, Waterdrop Peak would probably suffer heavy losses. So I suppressed my aura. Medicine Master Lu said worriedly. This won't affect your future cultivation, right? Lu Miaojin shook her head. Then, she looked up into the distance and said, Grandfather, Master has returned. Medicine Master Lu looked up. Sure enough, a long streak of light swept over from the sky and landed in their courtyard in the blink of an eye. They looked over and saw that it was Elder Yuchi. Miaojin, Elder Lu, these are the tokens that allow you to enter and leave the sect. Take these tokens and leave the Ascension sect immediately. The further the better. Don't ever return to the Ascension sect again. Elder Yuchi handed a token to Lu Miaojin and Medicine Master Lu as she spoke rather anxiously. Lu Miaojin instinctively took the token. She asked in a daze, Master, what's wrong? Why are you telling us to flee? The Nangong and Murong clans are here. They specifically said that they want you. If you fall into their hands, you'll suffer a fate worse than death. Leave quickly, Elder Yuchi said in a low voice. Lu Miaojin and Medicine Master Lu were shocked. They had heard that the Nangong and Murong clans were here, but they didn't know the true objective of the two clans. But now, they were actually here for Lu Miaojin. But how was that possible? Lu Miaojin had nothing to do with the two clans at all. The person they're really looking for is Zhuowen, but they couldn't find Zhuowen in the Ascension sect. So, they've set their sights on you. They want to use you to lure Zhuowen out. If you didn't have the spiritual water root, perhaps you'd be fine, but you do. If you fall into their hands, what will happen to you? I don't need to say more, Elder Yuchi said with a solemn gaze. Lu Miaojin's face instantly turned extremely pale. She muttered to herself, how did it become like this? The Nangong and Murong clans were the four great clans of the Ji province's prefecture overseer. Whether it was in terms of background or power, they were not inferior to the Ascension sect. In fact, they were even slightly stronger. There's no time to explain it to you now. Leave quickly, Elder Yuchi said rather anxiously. At that moment, a terrifying aura surged in the sky above Waterdrop Peak. Chapter 3764. Grand Elder. Lu Miaojin looked at the old man in the sky, and her face turned pale. This was the Grand Elder of the Ascension sect. His strength was second only to the sect leader, Li Yuanfeng. Even her master, Elder Yuqi, was no match for him. Elder Yuqi's expression changed drastically. She did not expect the Grand Elder to return. "Did the sect leader send you here?" Elder Yuqi asked in a trembling voice. The Grand Elder nodded and said, "Yes, the sect leader is worried about you going back alone. That's why he sent me here to supervise you. Junior Sister Yuqi, don't go down the wrong path. Hand Lu Miaojin over. I will pretend I didn't see what happened today." Elder Yuqi smiled bitterly and said, "Miaojin is my disciple. As a master, how can I hand my disciple over to suffer? Then are you stubbornly refusing to come to your senses? Then don't blame me for taking action." The Grand Elder snorted coldly and stopped talking nonsense with Elder Yuqi. He reached out his right hand and grabbed at Lu Miaojin. Bang! However, the moment the Grand Elder's right hand touched Lu Miaojin, it was hit by a powerful force and exploded. Elder Yuqi held the blue divine sword in her hand and stood in front of Lu Miaojin. "Junior Sister Yuqi, you are really stubborn. Since that's the case, I will take you down as well." The Grand Elder was enraged. He did not hold back and slammed his palm down. The sky above the Waterdrop Peak changed color. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. It was as if doomsday had arrived. In the crater, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. He raised his head and looked in the direction of the Waterdrop Peak. He felt a powerful battle aura there. Zhuowen was very familiar with this aura. It was the aura of a void god transformation realm master. There was no doubt that there were two void god transformation realm masters fighting in the direction of the Ascension sect. That is still the territory of the Ascension sect. The void god transformation realm masters should be elders. Why are there people fighting in the sect? Zhuowen frowned. However, he did not think too much about it. His cultivation had already reached the peak of the spirit transformation realm. He had been trying to break through to the heaven-trampling transformation realm. The heaven-trampling transformation was the third transformation of the heaven-crushing 9 transformations. If Zhuowen could successfully advance to the heaven-trampling transformation stage, then he would be able to walk through the air. This would make battle a lot more convenient. During this period of time, he had also made it to the 4th group of sinkholes. Now, he was cultivating in the 9th small pit of the 4th group of sinkholes. The chaotic energy here was much denser than the previous 3 groups of sinkholes. Zhuowen's cultivation speed here was extremely fast. He believed that he would be able to break through very soon. Zhuowen no longer paid attention to the battle waves from the Waterdrop Peak. Instead, he closed his eyes again. He had a premonition that he would be able to smoothly break through to the heaven-trampling transformation today. As long as he advanced to the heaven-trampling change realm, his strength would undergo an earth-shattering transformation. On Waterdrop Peak, Elder Yuqi was lying on the ground with wounds all over her body. The luxurious courtyard on the peak had long since been reduced to ruins. The Great Elder silently looked at the heavily injured Elder Yuqi and said indifferently, "Junior Yuqi, the difference between the early and late nihility god transformation stage is huge. You are not my opponent at all. Since we're from the same sect, I'll spare your life. I'll take this Lu Miaojin away." As he said that, the Great Elder opened his right hand and lifted Lu Miaojin across the air, taking to the air. "No, Miaojin, Miaojin." Apothecary Lu knelt on the ground, tears streaming down his old face. He was just a mortal and could not do anything. He could only watch as Lu Miaojin was taken away. Elder Yuqi's eyes were filled with disappointment. She knew that this was all caused by her uselessness. In the main peak's reception hall, Nangong Haoge and Elder Yin were somewhat impatient from waiting. Just as they were about to speak, Li Yuanfeng spoke first. Both of you, Lu Miaojin has been brought here. As soon as Li Yuanfeng finished speaking, the great elder strode into the reception hall. After he put down Lu Miaojin in his hand, he said respectfully to Li Yuanfeng, Sect Master, Lu Miaojin has been brought here. Thank you for your hard work, great elder. Li Yuanfeng nodded and immediately looked at Lu Miaojin. Lu Miaojin was dressed in white. Her face was pale, and she looked delicate and weak. A trace of tears faintly flashed across her cheeks. Her eyes were also red and swollen. Lu Miaojin, why aren't you kneeling when you see the sect master? The great elder snorted coldly and exerted his domineering pressure. Lu Miaojin's body trembled. She involuntarily knelt on the ground with her head lowered and did not say a word. Miaojin, the Nangong family and the Murong family are more powerful forces than the Ascension sect. They have taken a fancy to your potential and plan to take you away so that you can receive better training. Are you willing to go with them? Of course, you can rest assured that the Ascension sect will take good care of your grandfather. After you leave the Ascension sect, you don't have to worry about your grandfather. Li Yuanfeng smiled kindly and said gently. Lu Miaojin originally wanted to refuse, but when she heard Li Yuanfeng mention Apothecary Lu, her whole body trembled. In the end, she nodded and agreed. She was not a fool. Li Yuanfeng deliberately mentioned Apothecary Lu to threaten her. If she did not cooperate, Apothecary Lu's life would be in danger. Haha, Miaojin, you are indeed a good disciple of the Ascension sect. When you achieve meteoric success in the future, don't forget the sect's kindness in nurturing you. Li Yuanfeng said hypocritically. Lu Miaojin lowered her head and remained silent. Haha, we are not heartless people. After all, Lu Miaojin is a disciple of the Ascension sect. She will definitely be reluctant to leave the Ascension sect now. How about this? We will stay in the Ascension sect for 3 more days. During these 3 days, let Miss Miaojin properly say goodbye to her senior and junior brothers. Elder Ingyan stood up and said with a smile. However, Li Yuanfeng frowned slightly. He originally thought that these 2 people would leave the Ascension sect immediately after taking her away. However, he did not expect Elder Ingyan to not be in a hurry to return. He did not know what Elder Ingyan was up to. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, a vast and terrifying aura spread out within the Ascension sect like a tide. In the reception hall, everyone was alarmed by this aura. What a powerful aura. Did someone break through the 5 elements transformation? Murong Hauge's pupils shrank slightly as he looked outside the reception hall and muttered to himself. Elder Ingyan also revealed a shocked expression. He was also stunned by this aura. It was not only them. The Ascension School's Li Yuanfeng and the others were also staring at each other with confused expressions on their faces. Everyone walked out of the reception hall and looked at the source of the aura. They realized that it was the famous trial ground of the Ascension sect, the Heavenly Pit. Someone broke through the tribulation in the Heavenly Pit. Moreover, this tribulation is very terrifying. Even the Heavenly Pit's domain is unable to counteract it. This should be the tribulation of the 5 elements transformation. Li Yuanfeng looked in the direction of the Heavenly Pit. His eyes were filled with confusion. After all, to break through the 5 elements transformation, a cultivator had to be at least at the peak of the Void God transformation. In their Ascension sect, only Li Yuanfeng's cultivation had reached the peak of the Void God transformation. However, Li Yuanfeng was still at the main peak. Who else was qualified to break through the 5 elements transformation? Let's go and take a look. Li Yuanfeng's gaze was solemn as he led the group of elders towards the Heavenly Pit. Nangong Hauge and Elder Ingyan looked at each other. Their expressions did not look good as they followed behind. Chapter 3765. When Li Yuanfeng arrived at the crater with a group of elders, a cold voice came from within. Halt! If anyone dares to take a step forward, kill without mercy. When the words kill without mercy came out, a terrifying killing intent surged out. It was as if it had materialized and created a terrifying ripple. Li Yuanfeng grunted and stopped in his tracks. His eyes were filled with shock. The group of elders behind him spat out a mouthful of blood. Their faces were pale as they retreated. Nangong Haoge and Elder Ingyan, who were following closely behind Li Yuanfeng's group, had a drastic change in expression. They quickly stopped. This is the power of a 5 elements transformation expert. There's actually such an expert in this crater? Elder Ingyan was shocked as he transmitted his voice to Nangong Haoge. I'm afraid it's some old monster in the Ascension sect who hasn't died yet. Our Nangong family's great ancestor is still alive. Your Morong family must have one too. You don't have to be so shocked. Moreover, this kind of old monster is a survivor from the previous era. He doesn't have much lifespan left. They usually hide in the dark. Unless it's a matter of life and death for the sect, they won't make a move, Nangong Haoge said indifferently. Elder Ingyan snorted and said, but it's different now. Look at the calamity above the crater. It's definitely a terrifying calamity that only 5 elements transformation cultivators would encounter. There's a 5 elements transformation expert in the Ascension sect who's about to rise. This isn't good news for our 2 families. Nangong Haoge frowned and said helplessly, there's nothing we can do about it. We can't stop it at all unless we have another rank 2 astral weapon fragment. Zhuowen is the key. We must find that little bastard. I don't need you to tell me. Elder Ingyan said indifferently. Li Yuanfeng slowly retreated from the crater. He respectfully bowed at a mountain in front of the crater. He recognized a voice just now. It was the voice of the Ascension sect's great ancestor. He was the final pillar of the Ascension sect. All of you leave. Treat today's crater as if nothing happened. Within the crater, the stern voice sounded again and spread to everyone's ears. Yes. Li Yuanfeng bowed respectfully again, and then quickly left the area of the sinkhole with a group of confused elders. When Nangong Haoge and Elder Ingyan saw that Li Yuanfeng had left so straightforwardly, they naturally did not dare to stay here for long and left in embarrassment. Sect leader, why does that voice sound like the old man guarding the entrance of the sinkhole? Is that old man really that powerful? Many of the elders following behind Li Yuanfeng asked in confusion. Li Yuanfeng glanced at these elders. They had only joined the Ascension sect at a later stage, so they did not know the true identity of the old man. They had always thought that the old man was just the gatekeeper of the sinkhole. It was not surprising at all. However, as the leader of the Ascension sect, Li Yuanfeng knew much more than the average person. The guardian of the sinkhole was not simple. He was an expert left behind by the Ascension sect in the early days. He was in existence at the level of an ancestor of the Ascension sect. Li Yuanfeng also understood that this old man's strength was above the entire Ascension sect. He was at least at the 5 elements transformation realm. However, Li Yuanfeng sighed in his heart. This ancestor had long stopped caring about the matters of the Ascension sect. Regardless of whether the Ascension sect was flourishing or declining, he would not casually interfere unless the Ascension sect was in a life and death situation. Otherwise, with this ancestor's strength, it was enough for the Ascension sect to fight for a place among the 5 sections. After Li Yuanfeng and the others left, in the mountain at the entrance of the sinkhole, in an ordinary stone room, a black-robed elder frowned slightly. His consciousness was locked onto the sinkhole. This is too unbelievable. This kid's cultivation is only at the peak of the spirit transformation realm. Even if he broke through now, he would only be taking a step towards the heaven-trampling transformation realm. But is this the heaven-crushing tribulation of the heaven-trampling transformation realm? The black-robed elder muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with indescribable shock. This was because he felt that the power of the heaven-crushing tribulation was too terrifying. It had just begun, but the domain of the sinkhole could not withstand it and was gradually collapsing. He knew that the domain of the sinkhole was extremely powerful. Any heaven-crushing tribulation below the five elements transformation realm would be neutralized by the domain. However, Zhuowen was only going through the heaven-trampling transformation realm tribulation, and the domain of the sinkhole could not withstand it. Was this guy a freak? This kid is definitely a prodigy. An unprecedented prodigy. In the history of the Ji Prefecture governor, there has never been a prodigy who could create such a terrifying heaven-crushing tribulation while advancing to the heaven-trampling transformation realm. The black-robed elder's eyes were burning with passion. He had lived for many eras and had seen many prodigies. He had seen the Ji Prefecture governor, the founders of the 4 great clans and 5 sections. However, none of them were as terrifying as Zhuowen. The black-robed elder was very excited. He knew that he had picked up a treasure. He understood that this kid was comparable to the prodigies of the state regions and even the main regions. He was afraid that the Ji Prefecture governor was still too young for such a prodigy. I thought that I would be alone in the Ascension sect for the rest of my life and never step into the Wukong state region again. However, now I found a disciple who can meet your requirements. Good Tianxiao. I accidentally caused you to lose your beloved disciple back then. I've said that if I can't find a disciple who meets your requirements, I'll never step into the Wukong state region again. However, I think I can fulfill that promise now. The black-robed elder muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with reminiscence, as if he was recalling something. In the sinkhole, Zhuowen stood on a rock and looked up at the sky. In the sky above the sinkhole, the terrifying heaven-crushing tribulation fell endlessly. However, it was offset by an invisible force. That force was the domain of the sinkhole. However, Zhuowen noticed that as the tribulation grew stronger, the domain of the sinkhole began to weaken and weaken. His divine telekinesis could clearly sense that countless cracks had appeared on the surface of the invisible domain. He knew that the domain of the sinkhole would not last much longer. I didn't expect that just by advancing to the heaven-trampling transformation realm, the power of the heaven-crushing tribulation would be equivalent to the power of the heaven-trampling 5 elements transformation realm. Zhuowen muttered to himself as he silently looked at the tribulation in the sky that was getting stronger and stronger. However, Zhuowen was not afraid in the slightest. During this period of time, he had been improving. What he improved was not only his cultivation and strength, but also his divine abilities, comprehension, and temperament. Zhuowen knew very well that although his cultivation had only increased by 1 major realm, his overall strength had already undergone an earth-shattering transformation. Therefore, he did not need to prepare the materials to transcend the tribulation like before. This was because he believed that with his current strength, he could rely on himself to transcend any tribulation. Crack! In the sky above the sinkhole, a crisp cracking sound could be heard. Then, the dazzling and terrifying heaven-crushing tribulation broke through the domain of the sinkhole and rained down on Zhuowen. It's coming! Zhuowen's eyes were filled with battle intent. He had no intention of dodging the heaven-crushing tribulation. Instead, he stomped his right foot and rushed up. He wanted to directly face this terrifying heaven-crushing tribulation. Boom, boom, boom. Boundless tribulation energy smashed onto Zhuowen's body, emitting countless energy ripples. Chapter 3766. I'm no longer who I used to be. What's the big calamity? I'll break it with a punch. Zhuowen's eyes were dyed purple. With a punch, he actually forcefully blasted the great calamity wave in front of him into 2 halves. Meanwhile, he soared into the sky like a god of war draped in invincible battle armor. He had already stepped into the realm of the heaven-trampling transformation. At that moment, he could step into the sky and go anywhere. This kid's talent is terrifying. He can break through such a terrifying calamity. Although he's only at the heaven-trampling transformation, he already has the power of a void god transformation. In the stone room, the black-robed elder saw everything with his divine thought. The more he saw, the more shocked he became. Originally, he thought that Zhuan would have a hard time resisting such a calamity. He thought that he would have a slim chance of survival. However, this kid actually faced it head-on and broke through the calamity. He actually suppressed such a terrifying calamity with his own strength. The terrifying power of the calamity also affected the entire Ascension sect. 1/3 of the Sky Dragon Mountain range where the Ascension sect was located began to tremble violently. Countless disciples in the Ascension sect looked at the crater in awe. Everyone had a feeling that the person who was going through the calamity in the crater would be a rising star in the future. Although most of them did not know who was going through the calamity. What a terrifying calamity. Could it be that person? Zhong Xinyan stood on a mountain peak and looked at the terrifying calamity in the crater silently. Her beautiful eyes were filled with complicated emotions. She could not help but think of the young man who was sitting in the crater. After an unknown period of time, the sun gradually set. The terrifying calamity had finally ended. Everyone in the Ascension sect heaved a sigh of relief. Although many of the disciples were curious about the identity of the person who was going through the calamity. However, the higher-ups of the Ascension sect had given the order that no one was allowed to go near the crater today. Even the elders were not allowed. Bang! Zhuowen fell into the crater again, and the entire crater shook. Then, Zhuowen took a step forward and stood a few thousand meters above the crater. Walking in the air. This is the special power that the heaven-trampling transformation gave me. This feeling is amazing. Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a sharp light as he looked down at the huge pit below. There was an indescribable excitement in his heart. Ever since he entered the 100 Outer Realms, he couldn't fly anymore. He felt as if he had fallen from heaven into hell. However, now that he had advanced to the heaven-trampling transformation stage, he once again possessed the ability to fly. He had once again regained the feeling of being able to look down on all the other mountains. Traversing thousands of meters with a single step, this kid really isn't an ordinary heaven-trampling transformation cultivator. This is the first time I've seen such a powerful heaven-trampling transformation cultivator. The black-robed old man slowly walked out of the stone room. He raised his head and looked at Zhuowen, who was several thousand meters above him. The light in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. Zhuowen fell back into the sinkhole. Looking at the black-robed old man in front of him, he cupped his fists and said, "Senior, thank you for protecting me." Although Zhuowen had been undergoing the tribulation all this time, his divine sense had not relaxed at all. He was also paying attention to the outside world, especially after the heaven-crushing tribulation broke through the heavenly pit's domain. The commotion was simply too great. The entire Ascension sect was alarmed. The Ascension sect's sect master, Li Yuanfeng, and the others had all come over. If the black-robed old man had not shouted at Li Yuanfeng and the others to retreat, his tribulation might very well have been disturbed. At the same time, Zhuowen was also quite wary of this black-robed old man in his heart. This old man was able to shout at the Ascension sect's sect master, Li Yuanfeng, to retreat. It was clear that this person's identity was not ordinary, and he was also very powerful. "You don't have to be so polite to me. Zhuanyin Xue, I won't delve into your motive for joining the Ascension sect. However, you must remember to never do anything that will harm the Ascension sect. Also, if you have any requests from now on, I'll try my best to satisfy you. You can enter and exit the sinkhole freely. I can even unlock the authority of the 5th level of the Magical Abilities Pavilion for you. I can even make the decision to grant you some of the Ascension sect's astral weapon fragments." The black-robed old man's gaze became very serious. However, the conditions he offered were extremely tempting. "What price do I have to pay?" Zhuowen asked calmly. The black-robed old man's conditions had already attracted Zhuowen's attention. However, Zhuowen knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch in heaven. The black-robed old man would definitely ask for something in return for offering such generous conditions for him. "I only need you to owe me a request. When I ask you for a favor in the future, you must never refuse this request of mine. The black-robed old man said with a faint smile. What request? Zhuowen continued to ask. I can't tell you now. I'll wait until the right time to tell you this request. The black-robed old man said. Zhuowen turned around and walked straight toward the sinkhole's exit. The black-robed old man's pupils shrank slightly. He hurriedly went forward to stop Zhuowen. You? What do you mean? The black-robed old man frowned and asked. A request that can't be told immediately. I can't agree to this condition. Senior, your conditions are very tempting. However, in my opinion, those are things that I will get sooner or later. You're just giving them to me in advance. It's not enough to exchange for a request from you. After Zhuowen calmly finished speaking, he brushed past the black-robed old man's shoulder. The black-robed old man was stunned. He looked at Zhuowen's back that was gradually getting further and further away. He could not help but smile bitterly. This kid is really shrewd. However, the shrewder he is, the more assured I will be when he goes to Wukong State in the future. Sai, if I want this kid to agree to my request, I'm afraid I'll have to put in more effort. After Zhuowen left the sinkhole, he went straight back to his residence. He had already obtained the third proof token and was qualified to enter the third level of the Superpowers Pavilion. He planned to bring the third proof token to the Superpowers Pavilion the next day. It was already too late and night was about to fall. As soon as Zhuowen returned to his residence, he saw Tang Hongmiao sitting cross-legged in the courtyard next door. He was still cultivating. Perhaps he had noticed Zhuowen's movement, so he slowly opened his eyes. When he saw that it was Zhuowen, he happily went up to him. Brother Tang, you've improved quite quickly. Have you already broken through to the fourth blight? Zhuowen sized up Tang Hongmiao and found that he had already broken through. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Tang Hongmiao scratched his head in embarrassment and said, This is all thanks to you. Brother Zhuo, the cultivation technique you gave me is really amazing. My Taoist root is so weak, but I can still cultivate so quickly. Zhuowen said solemnly, The primordial technique doesn't have high requirements for the Taoist root, but you can't tell anyone about this cultivation technique. Otherwise, it will attract unnecessary trouble. You must remember this. Tang Hongmiao nodded seriously and said, Brother Zhuo, I know this even if you don't tell me. I definitely won't dare to tell anyone about this. Zhuowen nodded and continued. By the way, have the people from the Nangong family and the Murong family left the Ascension sect? Zhuowen already knew that the people from the Nangong family and the Murong family had come. In his opinion, it was impossible for the two families to find him in the Ascension sect while he was hiding his identity. Therefore, he thought that the two families should have left the Ascension sect on their own after they failed to find him. They haven't left yet. Tang Hongmiao sighed softly. They haven't left yet? Zhuowen frowned. The Nangong family and the Murong family came to find someone called Zhuowen, but there is no such person in the Ascension sect. Then, they asked for another person from the Ascension sect. They went too far and didn't put the Ascension sect in their eyes at all, Tang Hongmiao said angrily. Chapter 3767. I heard that she's an inner disciple. I remember that she's a girl called Lu Miaojin. Tang Hongmiao pondered. Zhuowen's pupils constricted when he heard that. A cold light shot out from his eyes. Nangong family, Murong family, you're really something. Zhuowen's expression was cold. Tang Hongmiao, who was standing next to him, felt the chill and could not help but shiver. Brother Zhuo, are you all right? Do you know Lu Miaojin? Tang Hongmiao noticed Zhuowen's strange behavior and asked carefully. Lu Miaojin is my savior. How dare the Nangong family and Murong family target her? Brother Tang, when do the two families plan to take Lu Miaojin away? Zhuowen asked. I heard that the two families gave Lu Miaojin 3 days. They should be taking her away in 3 days. Tang Hongmiao said, All right, in 3 days, follow me to the main peak. After saying that, Zhuowen directly stepped into his residence. What? To the main peak? Tang Hongmiao was confused. What did Zhuowen mean? Was he going to the main peak to save Lumiaogen? However, Zhuan had already closed the door. He could only return to his house with a stomach full of doubts. At dawn, Zhuan left his residence and headed straight to the Superpowers Pavilion. He had already obtained the 3rd proof token and planned to enter the 4th level of the Superpowers Pavilion today. You're here again. Are you going to enter the 3rd level of the Superpowers Pavilion today? The Superpowers Pavilion's administrator, Lianyu, greeted Zhuan when she saw him. Lianyu had a very deep impression of Zhuan. This guy was obviously an outer disciple, but the first time he entered the Superpowers Pavilion, he went against her. After that, he obtained 2 proof tokens and entered the 2nd and 3rd level of the Superpowers Pavilion. This was a height that many inner disciples could not reach. What was even stranger was that this guy stayed in the Superpowers Pavilion for an entire day and did not take any superpowers with him when he came out. He was really a strange person. Therefore, Lianyu had a very deep impression of Zhuan. I'm going to enter the 4th level of the Superpowers Pavilion today. Zhuan took out the 3rd token and tossed it to Lianyu. So it's the 4th floor. You can go up then. Lianyu answered subconsciously, but she quickly realized that something was wrong. She glared at Zhuan and said, "What did you say? The 4th floor? And this is the 3rd token. I now have the qualifications to enter the 4th level of the Supernatural Abilities Pavilion." Zhuan pointed at the token he threw on the table and said indifferently. Lianyu looked at the token carefully and said dejectedly, "You can go up now. The restriction on the 4th floor has been opened to you." When Zhuan went up, Lianyu was still in a daze. She still felt like she was dreaming. She still remembered that this guy had only been in the Mystical Abilities Pavilion for a little over 2 months, and he had already obtained 3 proof tokens in a row. This guy had at least passed through more than 40 sinkholes in the sinkholes. How did this guy do it? When Zhuan entered the 4th floor, he realized that there were fewer superpowers books than there were on the first 3 floors. He glanced around and realized that there were only about 30 books. He knew that these were all level 4 superpowers. In the G Prefecture, superpowers of this level were very rare. N, you're just an outer sect disciple. How did you enter the 4th level of the Superpowers Pavilion? A cold voice sounded. A young man with strange black tattoos on his face walked out from the back of a bookshelf. This young man was wearing a disciple's uniform. However, it was not the uniform of an outer sect or inner sect disciple. It was a different kind of disciple's uniform. This person's aura was extremely powerful. It was much more powerful than that of an inner sect disciple. This was a void god transformation elite. Zhuan narrowed his eyes. As far as he knew, the strongest genius among the inner sect disciples was a disciple named Cha Long. However, he was only at the peak of the Heaven Ascension transformation stage. However, Zhuan was not interested in this person's identity. He came to the Superpowers Pavilion to learn how to fuse superpowers, not to learn about gossip. Therefore, Zhuan merely glanced at this person. Then he walked to the nearest bookshelf and began to flip through the superpowers books. You're ignoring me? The young man's expression turned ugly. However, he did not lose his temper. Instead, he returned to his original spot and browsed through the superpowers books. He was not an impulsive person. The prohibition spell on the Superpowers Pavilion was extremely powerful. It would not allow an outer sect disciple to enter without permission. There must be a reason why this person was able to enter here. Plus, personal fights were not allowed here. If he had the time to be angry, he would rather spend it studying superpowers. However, the young man quickly realized that something was wrong. He realized that the outer sect disciple was walking around the 4th floor. He was not reading the superpowers books at all. What is this guy doing? The young man was very annoyed. He walked out of the bookshelf and strangely saw that Zhuan was walking around the bookshelf while quickly flipping through the superpowers books. After he was done, he walked around again and went to another place. He did the same thing and quickly flipped through the superpowers books. Is there something wrong with this guy's brain? The young man was dumbfounded. Who would enter the Superpowers Pavilion to read superpowers books like this? He thought that this guy was not here to learn superpowers. He was here to cause trouble. There really are fifth-level superpowers on this floor. And there are two of them. Zhuowen stopped at a corner. There, he found two fifth-level superpowers. Moreover, these two divine abilities were severely damaged. They couldn't be cultivated normally at all. Most likely, they were placed here as decorations. However, to Zhuowen, they were priceless treasures. This was because the Tai Word Stone could be used to deduce the complete superpowers books. After Zhuowen finished browsing through these two superpowers, he sat down in a lotus position. In his mind, he began to deduce the complete superpowers books. After around 2 hours, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. He had finished deducing the superpowers books and incorporated them into the Grand Mist Soldier spell. When Zhuowen finished browsing through all the superpowers on the 4th floor, his Grand Mist Soldier spell and Grand Mist movement technique had evolved again. The Grand Mist Soldier spell had evolved to the peak of 5th-level superpowers. As for the Grand Mist movement technique, it had barely reached the level of 5th-level superpowers. The reason why the Grand Mist movement technique's improvement was slower than the Grand Mist Soldier spell was mainly because there were not many movement-type superpowers in the Superpowers Pavilion. Zhuowen did not integrate enough superpowers books. Hence, the Grand Mist movement technique's improvement was slightly slower. After Zhuowen left the Superpowers Pavilion, he saw that it was still early. Hence, he went straight to the sinkhole. He planned to try the 6th group's sinkhole in the next few days. This sinkhole was indeed a good place. The further one went, the denser the chaotic energy. It was definitely a holy land for cultivation. Of course, the further one went, the more terrifying the pressure in the sinkhole was. Ordinary people did not have the qualifications to cultivate in there. Otherwise, they would easily lose their lives. After Zhuowen left the Superpowers Pavilion, the young man with the black lines on his face also walked down the stairs. He watched as Zhuowen left. Then, he went to Lianyu and asked, "Elder Lianyu, why was that outer sect disciple able to enter the 4th floor of the Superpowers Pavilion? Junior fan, you haven't been here for a long time. Hence, you don't know this person. He entered the 4th floor of the Superpowers Pavilion because he went through the sinkhole and obtained the proof token." Lianyu was very polite to the young man. He even tried to curry favor with him. Chapter 3768. Look, it's Fan Jiaoyang. He's the only core disciple of the Ascension sect, and the number 1 genius of the Ascension sect. I didn't expect him to come to the Superpowers Pavilion today. It's really Senior Brother Fan. It's my first time seeing him in person. He's so cool. People were coming and going at the entrance of the Superpowers Pavilion. Fan Jiaoyang's appearance immediately attracted the attention of many disciples. There were even many female disciples who were infatuated with Fan Jiaoyang. Fan Jiaoyang turned a deaf ear to the reactions of the surrounding disciples. Instead, he silently looked at Zhuowen's back as he left. How interesting. To be able to obtain the token to enter the 4th level of the Superpowers Pavilion. This means that this person has already passed the 5th group. How'd he do it? Fan Jiaoyang was bewildered. He often went to the giant pit to cultivate, and his highest record was only the 6th group. However, an outer disciple actually made it to the 5th group. No one in the inner sect could match this result. Another 2 days passed. On the main peak of the Ascension sect, Elder Ingyan and Murong Haoge were sitting in the reception hall. Li Yuanfeng sat on the main seat and said with a smile, "Lu Miaozhen will be here soon. I think the two of you should fulfill your promise." Nangong Haoge and Elder Ingyan looked at each other. They took out a spiritual ring and handed it to Li Yuanfeng. Li Yuanfeng scanned it with his divine telekinesis and found that there was indeed a rank 3 heaven-breaking divine artifact inside. He accepted the spiritual ring with satisfaction. It will take some time for Lu Miaozhen to arrive at the main peak. Sect Master Li, how about this? I've also brought the young experts of the Nangong family with me. They all want to see the strength of their peers in the Ascension sect. I wonder if Sect Master Li can fulfill their wish. Nangong Haoge said. He suddenly spoke. Li Yuanfeng looked at the young man in white beside Nangong Haoge. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "This must be the first young master of the Nangong family. Nangong Wuji?" Nangong Wuji, who was dressed in white, cupped his fists at Li Yuanfeng and said with a smile, "That's me. I've always heard that the Ascension sect has many geniuses with extraordinary strength, so I've always wanted to see it for myself. It just so happens that Uncle Haoge wants to make a trip to the Ascension sect. So, I shamelessly requested to follow him. I want to spar with the many genius disciples of the Ascension sect." Li Yuanfeng frowned slightly. He glanced at Nangong Haoge, who was calm and unruffled in the midst of chaos. How could he not know that Nangong Haoge was testing the strength of the younger generation of the Ascension sect? Plus, Nangong Wuji's name was very well known in the Ji prefecture. Li Yuanfeng had heard of him before, so he didn't really want to accept this challenge. However, if he, as the sect master, did not accept the challenge, it would be a disgrace to the Ascension sect. "First Elder, call Cha Long over," Li Yuanfeng said. The Great Elder nodded and took out his communication jade talisman to send a message to Cha Long. Not long after, Cha Long entered the guest hall. Cha Long greets sect leader and elders. Cha Long was a resolute young man. He knelt down in the guest hall with an excited look on his face. Cha Long, he is the first young master of the Nangong family, Nangong Wuji. He wants to spar with the experts of the younger generation of the Ascension sect. You are the #1 inner disciple. You can spar with him. Remember not to overdo it," Li Yuanfeng said. Cha Long nodded and stood up. His eyes were filled with fighting spirit as he looked at Nangong Wuji. Nangong Wuji looked at Cha Long strangely. He shook his head and said, "Sect Masterly, is this the #1 inner disciple of the Ascension sect? He's trash. He hasn't even reached the Void God transformation realm. I can crush him with a single finger." As soon as Nangong Wuji said this, Li Yuanfeng's face turned ugly. The rest of the Ascension sect's elders in the guest hall also wore gloomy expressions. Nangong Wuji was too presumptuous. How could he say that Cha Long was trash? Nangong Haoge immediately reprimanded him. "Wuji, don't be rude. How can you say such things?" After saying this, Nangong Haoge looked at Li Yuanfeng and said with a smile, "Wuji is young and impetuous. It's inevitable that he would be rude. Sect Masterly, you won't mind, right?" Li Yuanfeng snorted coldly. Since Nangong Haoge had already said this, it would be unbecoming of him if he lost his temper. Cha Long looked at Nangong Wuji angrily and said in a deep voice, "Nangong Wuji, let's fight." A mocking smile appeared on Nangong Wuji's face as he said, "I'm not just saying. Let's go outside the parlor. I'll only use one finger. You only deserve one finger from me." Cha Long couldn't take it anymore. He dashed out of the guest hall. Nangong Wuji landed gracefully on the ground and said calmly, "Go ahead. Humph. You will pay the price for looking down on others." Cha Long roared and charged forward. His body was like a ghost. Numerous shadows appeared on the ground. Then, he appeared behind Nangong Wuji like a ghost. He held a dagger in his hand and thrust it at the back of Nangong Wuji's head. Bang! Then, Cha Long found that Nangong Wuji had turned around and flicked his finger to deflect Cha Long's dagger. When Cha Long came back to his senses, Nangong Wuji's finger landed between Cha Long's eyebrows. Puff! Cha Long's eyebrows exploded and blood splattered everywhere. Cha Long screamed miserably. He held his eyebrows and rolled on the ground. Is he really in the Void God transformation realm? Nangong Wuji is indeed the first young master of the Nangong family. He is really powerful. Li Yuanfeng frowned. He thought that Cha Long would be able to hold on for a few rounds. He didn't expect Nangong Wuji to defeat Cha Long in just one round. Sect Masterly, is there no one else in the Ascension sect? He is too weak. Nangong Wuji said arrogantly. Sect Master, let Fan Jiaoyang fight him. He is strong enough to defeat Nangong Wuji. The first elder said angrily. The rest of the elders also made their requests. Nangong Wuji had challenged a disciple of the Ascension sect, and he was so arrogant. They were naturally unhappy with him, and they had to teach him a lesson. Since they were seniors, they couldn't deal with a junior. Only Fan Jiaoyang, a core disciple, could deal with this situation. Jiaoyang is here, Li Yuanfeng said calmly. As soon as Li Yuanfeng finished speaking, 3 figures walked in. They were 2 women and a man. The young man who walked in front had strange black tattoos on his face. He was Fan Jiaoyang, who Zhuan had met in the Superpowers Pavilion yesterday. The 2 women behind Fan Jiaoyang were Elder Yuqi and Lu Miaozhen. Master, elders, I have brought Lu Miaozhen here. Fan Jiaoyang looked at Nangong Wuji indifferently. He walked into the living room and knelt down on one knee. Jiaoyang, you have done well. Li Yuanfeng looked at Fan Jiaoyang with satisfaction and said to Lu Miaozhen, Miaozhen, the Nangong family and the Murong family will treat you well. Don't worry, you can go to them now. Lu Miaozhen nodded mechanically as if she was numb. She walked to Nangong Haoge and Eldering inside and stood there motionlessly. And that is Nangong Wuji. He wants to exchange pointers with the young experts of our Ascension sect. You go and show him the strength of our Ascension sect. Li Yuanfeng pointed at Nangong Wuji and said to Fan Jiaoyang. Chapter 3769. Fan Jiaoyang, I have heard of you. You are the only core disciple of the Ascension sect. You are the strongest among the younger generation of the Ascension sect. If I defeat you, there will be no one among the younger generation of the Ascension sect. Nangong Wuji stared coldly at Fan Jiaoyang. His words were not polite at all. Haha, you are very confident. However, you will never be able to fulfill your promise. You're no match for me. Fan Jiaoyang yawned. A shapeless shadow was moving toward Nangong Wuji from beneath his feet. When Nangong Wuji realized what was happening, the shadow was already beneath his feet. Then, countless black ropes appeared from the shadow and bound Nangong Wuji's limbs. Haha, it seems like the outcome has been decided. Jiaoyang's Dao root is very special. It is the illusory Dao root. He can control any shadow and turn it into a tangible force. His attacks are silent and impossible to guard against. Li Yuanfeng, who was sitting on the main seat, laughed when he saw this scene. He was pleased with himself. Fan Jiaoyang's strength is indeed not bad. If I'm not wrong, he should be at the early stage of the Void God transformation stage. Coupled with his mysterious Dao root, an early-stage Void God transformation stage cultivator would be easily defeated. However, Sect Leader Li, you might not know that Wuji's strength is not only at the early empty God transformation realm. Nangong Haoge sat upright in his seat with a calm face. He was not worried about Nangong Wuji being tied up at all. Instead, he joked. Li Yuanfeng's eyes narrowed. He was surprised to see a terrifying aura erupting from Nangong Wuji's body. This aura formed a strong wind that broke the ropes around Nangong Wuji's body. What? Your cultivation? Is it the intermediate empty God transformation realm? Fan Jiaoyang looked at Nangong Wuji in disbelief. He did not expect that there would be a cultivator with a higher cultivation than him in the younger generation. Brother Fan, you are not being nice. You attacked me before the battle even started. I am not even ready. Nangong Wuji grinned, revealing a row of white teeth. Fan Jiaoyang felt a tinge of fear in his heart. Soon, Nangong Wuji disappeared. Then, Nangong Wuji's mocking voice came from behind him. Brother Fan, where are you looking? Fan Jiaoyang suddenly turned around, and then a huge fist smashed into his face. Gotcha! The power of this punch was so great that there were continuous explosions in the air. After that, Fan Jiaoyang rolled on the ground for a long distance before stopping. His face was completely swollen, his nose bridge was shattered, and his face was almost unrecognizable. After Fan Jiaoyang struggled to stand up, Nangong Wuji's ghostly figure reappeared and kicked Fan Jiaoyang's chest. Fan Jiaoyang flew up into the air, while Nangong Wuji moved like lightning, shuttling back and forth in the air. Every time Nangong Wuji kicked Fan Jiaoyang back and forth in the air, Fan Jiaoyang was unable to fall down. He was like a child who had done something wrong. It's okay. They can't do anything to us. As Zhuowen spoke, he noticed Fan Jiaoyang, who was lying on the ground after being beaten up. He recognized Fan Jiaoyang at a glance. Wasn't he the young man he met at the 4th level of the Superpowers Pavilion a few days ago? Now, he was seriously injured. Junior brother, leave quickly. This isn't a place you should be. Fan Jiaoyang also recognized Zhuowen. He hurriedly spoke, intending to ask Zhuowen to leave this place. Zhuowen came to Fan Jiaoyang's side. He took out a healing elixir and handed it to Fan Jiaoyang. Fan Jiaoyang's gaze was complicated. He rejected Zhuowen's healing elixir and took out a higher-grade healing elixir. Zhuowen was speechless. As expected of a core disciple of the Ascension sect, he always had a high-grade healing elixir on him. Chapter 3770. An outer disciple of the Ascension sect? What are you two trash doing here? Or is it to say that your Ascension sect has no one and is planning to send 2 pieces of trash to send me away? Nangong Wuji cast a sidelong glance at Zhuowen and Tang Hongmiao. His eyes were full of disdain when he discovered that their auras were not strong. Who are you? Don't block my way. I have something to say to Li Yuan Feng. Zhuowen waved his hand impatiently. He did not know Nangong Wuji and was not interested in him. He had come to question Li Yuan Feng about why he had handed Lu Miaojin over to the Nangong family and the Murong family. Junior brother, he is Nangong Wuji, the most powerful person among the younger generation of the Nangong family. Even I am no match for him. Don't provoke him. Fan Jiaoyang reminded Nangong Wuji with a bitter smile. Nangong Wuji? Zhuowen sized up the young man in front of him. It was not the first time he had heard of Nangong Wuji's name. Lu Yichuan had mentioned this name to him when he was in Yunjin Ridge. The person Lu Yichuan wanted him to challenge was Nangong Wuji. Nangong Wuji did not expect to meet this person in the Ascension sect. No one can save you today. You are just an outer disciple of the Ascension sect. How dare you insult me? Blue veins appeared on Nangong Wuji's forehead. He was completely enraged by Zhuowen's words. Go to hell. Nangong Wuji moved like a ghost and disappeared from where he was. In the blink of an eye, he appeared above Zhuowen. His fist smashed out with the force of a thunderbolt. His momentum was like a rainbow as he smashed toward Zhuo Wen's Tianling point. He had used all his strength in this punch. He was determined to kill Zhuowen. Soon after, Nangong Wuji was shocked to discover that Zhuowen had disappeared before his eyes. His fists had landed on the ground. Then, a strong wind came and hit Nangong Wuji's back. It was Zhuo Wen's whip kick. The powerful force behind the kick set off a terrifying shockwave. Nangong Wuji took the full brunt of the attack and fell to the ground in a sorry state. What? In the guest hall, everyone involuntarily stood up and looked at this scene in disbelief. This was Nangong Wuji, who had just defeated the number 1 disciple of the inner sect, Cha Long, and the core disciple, Fan Jiaoyang. But now, Nangong Wuji was trampled to the ground by an unknown outer disciple. This was too exaggerated. Nangong Haoge clenched his fists tightly as he stared at Zhuowen. He was the most shocked. This must be a joke. Fan Jiaoyang was already stunned on the spot. At this moment, he felt as if there were countless horses galloping through his heart. It was really too complicated. Zhuowen wasn't surprised. His primordial chaos movement art had fused the essence of many movement art divine abilities. It was incomparably exquisite. In the entire Ji Prefecture's prefecture overseer, there was probably not a single movement divine ability that could compare to the primordial movement technique. Now that Zhuowen had used his movement art, even a 5 elements transformation realm expert might not be able to catch up with him, let alone Nangong Wuji, who was only at the middle stage of the empty god transformation realm. Nangong Wuji roared and started to unleash all of his strength. However, he was horrified to find that a strange energy surged out from the young man who was trampling on him. It was actually suppressing his strength. Nangong Wuji couldn't get up at all. He could only be humiliated by being trampled on and used as a stepping stone. Sect Masterly, your Ascension sect has really hidden your strength well. I didn't know that you had such a genius, Nangong Hauga said to Li Yuanfeng. His face was gloomy as he looked coldly at Zhuowen. Li Yuanfeng smiled embarrassedly and said, he is the seed that our Ascension sect has been nurturing. He can't show himself easily. Although Li Yuanfeng said this, he was completely dumbfounded. Zhuowen was a complete stranger to him. He had never seen Zhuowen before. Li Yuanfeng looked coldly at the elder who was in charge of the outer sanctum. How could he not have discovered such a genius disciple in advance? I see. Nangong Hauga snorted coldly. Then, he looked at Zhuowen and said, Now, remove your dirty feet. Get lost. Zhuowen looked coldly at Nangong Hauga. He lifted one of his feet and stomped fiercely. This stomp was infused with the power of the Hongmeng soldier formula. When he stomped down, a crisp sound of metal clashing could be heard. The entire open space, and even the main peak, seemed to have been shaken by this stomp. Nangong Wuji screamed and spat out a mouthful of blood. He rolled his eyes and foamed at the mouth. Who do you think you are? You wanted to get lost? Why do you have to do that? Zhuowen said indifferently. At this moment, the atmosphere in the reception hall became very strange. Everyone's gaze became strange. This was the first time that they had seen such an arrogant disciple. He dared to scold Nangong Hauga in front of him. Nangong Hauga was the second most powerful person in the Nangong family. What an interesting guy. This is the first time that Nangong Hauga has been humiliated. Elder Ingyan looked at Zhuowen and muttered to himself with interest. Sect Masterly, are all the disciples of your Ascension sect so ill-mannered? Wuji has already been defeated. Why hasn't this little bastard let go? He even insulted me in public. If it weren't for you, I would have attacked this little bastard long ago. Nangong Hauga took a deep breath and looked at Li Yuanfeng with a sinister gaze. Brother Hauga, calm down. Let me handle this matter. After comforting Nangong Hauga, Li Yuanfeng said to Zhuowen, Let go of Nangong Wuji first. After all, he is a member of the Nangong family. You have already defeated him. Don't push your luck. This matter ends here. However, Zhuowen smiled.